Well, the country's about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. At this point, it's almost impossible to imagine that it was ever controversial to want to honor Dr. King. But in 1983, it certainly was to Jerry Falwell when he came on Crossfire.
Why not?
I don't think we need any more holidays.
Why not a Martin Luther King Day?
I just feel that there are other black Americans and the corporate body of black Americans who are due honor more than one recent individual about whom there's a great question mark even to this moment.
What is the question mark?
The question mark is that so far all the records on him are sealed. And neither you, Tom, nor I really know what they're going to say.
Are you talking about his personal character,
yes,
and his personal morality, and his personal life,
and he may
as well as any connection?
He may be as clean as Billy Graham, but we don't know that because the records are sealed.
The Cows, Justice, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism. Today's date, Thursday, September 4th, 2014, so I have been told. We should be back tomorrow, book study session. We also will be here on Saturday, sorry. Got my days mixed up. We'll be here on Saturday, of course, for the compensatory call-in. If you have questions, get confused, feel free. You can follow us on Twitter at Until Justice. Again, at Until Justice. You can also drop an email, untiljustice@gmail.com. The voice you heard at the beginning of the broadcast, the late Mr. Jerry Falwell, founder of Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. Spent quite a bit of time in Virginia. I know the state well, even though I haven't been there in a while. Great way to start off our broadcast, hopefully give some context for the program we're going to have today. I had said frequently our book study session, the late Dr. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I had said that this book is so popular. I've said repeatedly, I'm surprised even to this day that I was able to graduate high school, didn't have to read this book. I feel like I saw every other student that I was in high school with. They had this book, they had to read this book, had to take a test on this book for an English class somewhere along the line, and somehow I got through and never had to turn a page. And it just seems to be a very popular text in the academy, even at the collegiate level. It seems to be very popular, read in many, I think, English classes, literature classes, history classes, even some classes I suspect where they are directly studying race, that this book will pop up and be one that's read. And I just, anything like that, where it's a black author and they're talking explicitly about racism and becomes very popular. I tend to have questions about why is that and what is said about the book, particularly if you're in an environment where it's white instructors or white people controlling the curriculum and what's going to be said. That makes it even more significant to me in terms of what exactly is said and how they frame a discussion on such a text. I think one of our listeners, way back when we started our study session on I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, I think one of our listeners found an interesting essay written by our guest for today's program after he had heard me making some of these comments. That essay, what Maya Angelou means when she says Shakespeare must be a black girl. Contacted her, thought it would be grand to have her on the program. Incidentally, she was supposed to be with us a week ago, but the events in Ferguson disrupted our schedule a bit. We were trying to make sure that we could get former Seattle Police Chief Norm Stamper with us on the program, and he could only squeeze us in last Thursday, and definitely wanted to get his thoughts on that. And she was flexible and patient enough with us to reschedule and visit with us today. When I explained this to her, she actually said that she had been recommending this book to people to get a better understanding of what has unfolded in Ferguson, Missouri over about the last month almost now with the death of Michael Brown Jr. Will be grand to get her thoughts on that, as well as kind of going over some of the key points in the text. Our guest, she earned a PhD and an MA at the State University of New York at Buffalo. She is a professor of English at Liberty University. She is a member of Faith Advisory Council of Humane Society of the United States. Real pleasure to have her on the broadcast. Joining us live, Dr. Karen Swallow Pryor. Dr. Pryor, are you with us?
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Thursday with us. Real pleasure to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure to join you.
For sure. For our listeners, this might be their first time hearing about you and the work that you do. Anything that you would like to tell them that you think would be helpful as we begin the program?
Well, I was listening to your introduction, and I think you introduced me just fine. I'm an English professor. I've studied Maya Angelou a little bit, teaching her work primarily in my women's literature course, and one of my favorite lifetime events probably is the fact that I actually have heard her speak twice, but the most recent time was just a couple of years ago, which prompted the essay that you mentioned I wrote for The Atlantic. I got to hear in one of the last lectures that she gave and to take my entire class, and it was such a historic moment to hear her in person and so close to her death that that was a chance that could have easily been lost, but it was wonderful.
Right on, right on. For listeners who haven't seen your photo, they haven't been to your page at Liberty, you are a white woman, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right on.
Are you a black man?
Black male, yes ma'am.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Right on. This program, The C.O.W.S, I have unfortunately concluded that the events in Ferguson and really what I know why the caged bird sings is all about, in my opinion, is the system of racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms as synonyms, racism and white supremacy, and the definition that I use for both terms is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists, and do you think that's an accurate definition?
I think that certainly such people exist, and I think a system exists whether knowingly or intentionally or not. I think systemic racism is alive and strong and thriving, and one of the problems in combating it is just simply that people don't understand the difference between systemic racism and individual racism. So I think for the most part that's a good working definition.
Okay. I guess we'll kind of get into that, some of the issues that you just raised about individual racism and systemic racism. That'll come up. I think I'll even be able to bring that up within the context of what Dr. Angelou wrote. I guess before I get started, since you did point out that I guess some people have some misunderstandings about all of this, and I think one of the things that would be most helpful is having open, honest dialogue. Jerry Falwell certainly would be an interesting person to study with regards to some of the public remarks that he has made about racism. He's passed away now, but a lot of video, a lot of written text with regards to his views and what he said over time. Is that something that is discussed at Liberty University at all?
Yes, actually it is. I mean, I know what I talk about in my classroom and among my colleagues and friends. It's a big university, but I've been in a number of occasions where it has come up. As a matter of fact, I make a point when any issues related to racism or any kind of prejudice of lots of kinds comes up. I point to that as an example of how blind we can be to our own prejudices and biases, and how, as a Christian, I believe largely through the grace of God, but also through education and exposure, we can come to greater understanding and to change our views. Jerry Falwell did repent of his racism long after those many public statements and many regrettable actions. Actually, one of the things that he did that I tell my students about is the fact that the school, not Liberty University, but the K through 12 school that he started, now called Liberty Christian Academy, was actually begun in protest of the desegregation of schools here in Lynchburg, Virginia. And that is a horrible legacy to carry. Now, Dr. Falwell did repent. Of course, that repentance did not get as much, as media play or as much publicity and so forth. But that is actually one of the reasons why Liberty University, if you look up the statistics, we have a far greater representation of African American students and all minority students than most other comparable universities. If you look in the Barron's books and so forth, because that's part of the small bit of reparation I think that Dr. Falwell made at the university for his past racism was providing greater opportunities for students at Liberty University. So I've rambled a little bit, but it's just an example that there are lots of opportunities to bring up this entire past because it's part of our schools and our community's legacy. And it's a regrettable and shameful one, yet there has been change, there has been growth, and I mean that's really what I hope we're all about.
Right on. A lot of this stuff is available online. You can see he did not just make, in my view, racist comments about Dr. King, also Nobel Prize winner Desmond Tutu. Even in my opinion, this is in the book. You all can check it out yourself, the book of Jerry Falwell, Fundamentalist Language and Politics by Susan Friend Harding, where she says that he even made an effort to kind of expunge his own record by going through and removing some of the commentary that he had made supporting what is called segregation, in my opinion, racism, white supremacy. I would give some pretty stiff pushback with regards to, I think you said that how we can be blind to our own prejudices. I'm not sure what that means. To me, it almost suggests as though he was not aware of his racist behavior, racist beliefs, and that.
I wasn't talking about him specifically.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, the fact that he tried to erase those things, which then obviously that he's changed his mind because he's wasn't proud of them anymore. No, I just mean as human beings. I mean, I'm a professor, I'm a teacher, so I'm always looking for teachable moments. So when I'm talking to my students, and using this as an example, first of all, so they know that their history of their own university and the legacy of Liberty University, which has this shameful past, but that also is an opportunity to look at ourselves, because we can't change what someone else has done, especially, and can't change the past, but we can change ourselves and change the future. So.
Okay. I get, as a teachable moment, I think many people are saying the same thing about the death of Michael Brown Jr. and what's happened in Ferguson over the past month almost now.
Right.
You said, in fact, I read a statement online. This is from Jeremy Townsley. He says that he's a friend of yours, and he wrote that, I'll just read what he said, "My friend Karen Swallow Pryor has been encouraging people to read Maya Angelou's first autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Karen argues that this book does an excellent job of demonstrating the structural issues involved with race, the ways people's lives are influenced by the color of their skin, and the discriminatory practices that accompanied that distinction. As it happens, I finished Caged Bird the day before Michael Brown was shot. We were reading it for a book group I was part of in Portland. The early part of the book takes place in the late 1930s in the cotton country, Arkansas. But the structural difference between what white folks, as she put it, could do and black folks could do was gut-wrenching. That was 20 years before Brown v. the Board of Education and 30 years before the Voting Rights Act. But lay Angelou's book from the 30s and 40s alongside Ta-Nehisi Coates' article on reparations in The Atlantic and you see a stunning consistency over time. This is the real issue with Ferguson. It's that pattern of structure in which people find themselves create the kinds of animosities and cognitive assumptions that take a confrontation between a young man and a public service officer and make them symbols of everything that has constrained part of the population for literally generations. We talk about white privilege, but that privilege is really the freedom not to worry about these larger structural concerns. Many of the folks in Ferguson and neighborhoods like it don't have that freedom. Again, Mr. Jeremy Townsley, what can we learn from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings that would help us get a better grasp of what happened in Ferguson?
Well, speaking, of course, as a white person, and speaking primarily to white people in my conversations, not that that's just we're the majority race in my community, my interactions. I think the greatest value that it can offer is, as I was saying before, a lot of white people who don't feel racist and who haven't seen racism want to think that it really doesn't exist or that, it's over with. And that's just not a valid way of looking at the world. I mean, just because one person has not experienced something or has not seen it, which that's debatable too, but even granted that does not mean that it doesn't exist. And so I just think I could talk. There are a lot of things I want to say about I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. So this is just one wonderful thing about it is that for someone, even someone like myself who does already see and has witnessed the effects and ongoing acts of systemic racism, let alone individual racism, I've seen that too. It just allows me to, through her words and her experiences, to vicariously experience something that I've not experienced. I mean, she's just a beautiful writer, a gifted writer, but even so, her experiences were not unusual or extraordinary or different. Those were the common experiences of those times. And even though this was took place decades ago, she only just recently died, and you don't just forget those experiences. None of us forget any of our experiences. And so when you multiply the experiences, those kinds of experiences of one person being perpetrated upon an entire race of people in our nation, then I don't know how anyone could disbelieve that systemic racism exists and that its effects are rippling forever. So that was a long answer. I mean, I just think it's a very valuable educational experience for everyone, especially those who have not experienced these things. It opens up one's eyes to what has gone on in the past and why its effects continue today, even the system continues today.
I want to read a passage that, to me, I mean, it's striking how similar this is to what we just witnessed with regards to Michael Brown Jr., his death, and Ferguson. But I am incredulous, and this is not just you directly, but really anytime I hear anyone, a white person or a non-white person, saying that this most recent event, if individuals are willing and they're able to be honest and do some exploring and maybe even feel a bit uncomfortable, that it can give them an opportunity to understand racism that maybe they don't experience as a white person. I'm incredulous because there are lots of these moments. We just went through this last summer with Trayvon Martin where we had this exact same conversation. So I'm very incredulous because we keep saying the same thing and going through the same thing, and it doesn't seem to solve the problem. So I'm highly suspicious when I hear that. But this, to me, really stood out a lot in terms of what we could learn about racism, white supremacy, and really white people, I think. This is on page 197 of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, where she writes, Mr. Bubba told me, and this is Bailey speaking, Mr. Bubba told me I was too young to see something like that, and I ought to hightail it home, but I had to stay. Then the white man called us closer. He said, "Okay, you boys stretch him out in the calaboose, and when the sheriff comes along, he'll notify his people. This here's one nigger nobody got to worry about no more. He ain't going nowhere else." Then the men picked up corners of the sheet, but since nobody wanted to get close to the man, they held the very ends, and he nearly rolled out on the ground. The white man called me to come and help too. Mama exploded. Who was it? She made herself clear. Who was the white man? Bailey couldn't let go of the horror. I picked up a side of the sheet and walked right in the calaboose with the men. I walked in the calaboose carrying a rotten, dead Negro. His voice was ancient with shock. He was literally bug-eyed. The white man played like he was going to lock us all up in there, but Mr. Bubba said, "Oh, Mr. Jim, we didn't do it. We ain't done nothing wrong." Then the white man laughed and said we boys couldn't take a joke and opened the door. He breathed his relief. Whew! I was glad to get out of there. The calaboose and the prisoners screaming they didn't want no dead nigger in there with them, that he'd stink up the place. They called the white man boss. They said, "Boss, surely we ain't done nothing bad enough for you to put another nigger in here with us, and a dead one at that." Then they laughed. They all laughed like there was something funny. And I thought that scene, particularly since, and I think rightfully so, a good portion of media outlets have pointed out that Michael Brown Jr.'s body was left in the street for over 4 hours in the hot sun after he had died. And at least to me, that tells me a lot that is still happening, that disregard, flagrant disregard for black life and even a dead black person still exists. And that just informs me a lot about the system of racism, white supremacy, and really the lack of value that white people collectively have for black life. Is that an accurate reading of the text, and what does that suggest to you?
You're reading right. I don't know enough about law enforcement. I don't know how long bodies have to stay there while they investigate. So I hadn't made that connection because I don't know how long they normally lay there while they do their investigative work. And obviously, it doesn't even matter how long he laid there because the whole problem exists of the shooting itself is the problem that's the problem. And the continuing distrust between the races as evidenced in Ferguson. So that's a horrifying passage from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It's a horrifying. That's why I think that white people and everybody should read it, because there is no denying. I mean, the fact that happened, and that we continue to have these kinds of problems just means that we have a lot further to go. I don't know what else to say about it. I don't have words for that kind of thing.
Wow. I would point out one thing. I don't, in my opinion, words, you're an English professor, so you should appreciate this. For me, I think it is being euphemistic and inaccurate when people say race relations or distrust between the races, because that's not really getting at the problem. The problem is about mistreatment. I'm sure that there are many black people that distrust other black people. I know that there are many white people who distrust other white people. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about white people being in a position of power to abuse and terrorize black people. That's not really just saying that it's an issue of mistrust. It's really, in my opinion, not giving an accurate depiction of what the problem is. And I certainly think with regards to I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, it is a lot deeper than just black people don't trust white people. It is much deeper.
You're absolutely right. That's a point well taken. I'm speaking about what happened, the initial shooting in Ferguson. I don't know enough about that specific event. I know when I speak about the distrust, I'm talking about all the events that happened afterwards, which I think point to the much deeper problems that you're talking about. So I appreciate that. Very important distinction.
Right
yeah.
on.
We can distrust one another, but that doesn't mean that we abuse and mistreat one another. Absolutely. And that's the problem. That's the biggest problem.
Right on. I would say for folks who want to check in that the Ferguson enforcement officers did address the body being in the street so long, over 4 hours, and they blamed that on the black bystanders, saying that crowd control became an issue and they made it difficult for them to do their job in gathering evidence and being able to process the scene of this shooting. But they did even have to address that because it seemed to be a little bit of an anomaly for what typically happens if there's a fatality.
Okay. I don't know how that works, but I understand that.
Right on. This is on, or actually, I'll just read this one quickly because it just further makes the point where it's not necessarily involving a dead black person, but the passage where she goes to the dentist who Dr. Angelou's grandmother had helped. It seems in the text she had loaned him some money so that he could keep his office, keep his dentist practice rolling. And she went, Dr. Angelou had a toothache of some sort, and she went hoping that he would help her out and work on her teeth. And his response, it's been talking about the money that she loaned.
I know this line that you're going to say. It makes me sick.
It's been paid, and raising your voice won't make me change my mind. My policy, he let go of the door and stepped nearer Mama. The three of us were crowded on the small landing. Annie, my policy is I'd rather stick my hand in a dog's mouth than in a nigger's. Quite a bit deeper than distrust. Were you going to say something about this passage?
No, I know that I knew what line you were going to quote. It's just like I said, it just makes me sick to that line. I mean, there is much, but for whatever reason, that line sticks with me more than any other.
Would that further at least?
Disgusting.
Absolutely. Would that further? In my opinion, I think there's a long track record of this sort of white people devaluing black life, and even Dr. Falwell's behavior in terms of not wanting to educate black children. Would that kind of further evidence this white people devaluing black life?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you're not going to find an argument with me there.
I'm trying to, and as I said kind of at the introduction, I'm very curious as to why a text like this would be so popular. And you please correct me if I'm wrong. I get the sense that this is a wildly popular book in the academy, university level, even high school level, where this is required reading for many students. It's widely taught, women's liberation courses and what have you, gender studies, race studies, African-American literature, English literature. I feel like this text is there, and that it even makes me think, have you gotten a sense in terms of why this book is so popular amongst many white people, particularly in the academy?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that, to be frank. My area of expertise is 18th century British literature, and so this is outside my range of expertise. I just have taught it, as I mentioned before, in my women's literature class, and picked it up to read it again and promoted it after the events of Ferguson. So I can't really speak to its academic popularity. I know that my book jacket says, that it was an instant classic and bestseller when it came out. But I don't really know. I suppose you have some ideas.
I might, but I mean, you are a white person, and you said that you recommended this book, and you've even written an article about this book. You, as a white woman, what stuck out?
Yeah,
about
actually,
this book
I didn't write an article about the book. I actually wrote an article about Maya Angelou's lecture that I attended at Randolph College.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't write an article about the book.
Well, you're talking about her in the book where she talks about Shakespeare being her first love and what she was able to glean.
Right, she does say that, but if you read the article that I wrote, she said that at the lecture, and that's what I was talking about, the lecture she gave a couple of years ago.
Okay, it is in her book, though. I still think that's,
Oh, right. But I'm just saying, I didn't write it. I've never written about the book, so I just I wrote about her lecture.
Okay. Granted, appreciate the clarification. Still, you did recommend this text and saying that people could learn something about Ferguson with all of this. You said that you've read it. You said you picked it up to reread it. So, what specifically did you learn?
Yeah, I thought that it would help people understand systemic racism, which is the issue I see that needs to be addressed as it relates to Ferguson and Trayvon Martin and so many other things. So I thought that people seeking to have better understanding of systemic racism, it's just a great book to read. I recommend a lot of books. That's pretty much what I do on my social media, is recommend all kinds of books for people to read since I'm an English professor. That's what I do.
What do you make of the passage where she says that she did not think of white folks as being people? She didn't think of them as being human. That's thus the term white folks.
What did I think of it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall that passage in particular.
I will read it. This is on page.
Can you tell me what chapter? I have a different. My pages aren't the same as yours. So which chapter is it?
It's the very end of chapter 4. The very last page of chapter 4. It's the last paragraph. Really, the last 2 paragraphs give the whole story. She says, "I looked at the items that weren't on display. I knew, for instance, that white men wore shirts as Uncle Willie did, and that they had an opening for taking out their things and peeing, and that white women's breasts weren't built into their dresses, as some people said, because I saw their brassieres in the baskets. But I couldn't force myself to think of them as people. People were Mrs. Legrune, Miss Hendricks, Mama, Reverend Sneed, Lily B., and Louise, and Rex. White folks couldn't be people because their feet were too small, their skin too white and see-through-y, and they didn't walk on the balls of their feet the way people did. They walked on their heels like horses. People were those who lived on my side of town. I didn't like them all, or, in fact, any of them very much, but they were people. These others, the strange, pale creatures that lived in their alien unlife, weren't considered folks. They were white folks." So what do you think of her commentary that whites do not qualify as people? They are white folks.
I think that's one of the many passages that displays the power of her literary craft. She's painting a picture through words of her perspective, using wonderful details that place the reader there and allow us to see the world through her eyes. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about that can be so transformative, not just about this book, but really about all great literature, that it can expand our understanding, expand our experiences by being able to see the world through other people's eyes. And what she's doing there, I mean, she's actually showing us how many white people were feeling about black people, and that, by seeing her view can help us to see where our view is wrong.
As a white woman,
go ahead.
I was going to say, as a white woman, you don't seem bothered by the notion of her denying the humanity of white people. Did I misread that?
Do I seem bothered? I mean, I think it's a great human tragedy for any of us to feel that way about each other. But that's the problem that we're talking about, right? I mean, it's devastating. I mean, her words are an indictment, right? But they should be.
That's interesting. That to me, it's interesting when I read this passage and hearing your response. That's why I said I'm very curious as to what affinity white people have for this text. When I read it, I said, this rings hollow. And anybody, if you listen to the book study session, it's in the archives, we got to this portion of it, I said, this rings hollow. I don't believe this. And I said, I'm open to criticism. Anyone, feel free to challenge me. I'm not an English major. I don't have a degree in English, so I could be wrong. But I would say I don't believe it because there are too many passages in this book, including the introduction of the book, where she is daydreaming about being a white person, longing to be a white person, and she identifies God as white. It's very difficult for me to believe, really, it's impossible for me to believe that you don't think of white folks as being people when you yourself wish you were white and you think of the Creator as being white. Does that contradiction, is that, go ahead.
You must never have been a conflicted adolescent, were you? I thought that was the nature of all adolescents, is having conflicting feelings about one's identity and oneself. At least maybe that's more for girls. And I guess maybe that goes across races. So maybe that's, I think girls and adolescents, it's not the same thing. It's not to the same degree. But I can say that I looked at the skinny cheerleader girls with the beautiful straight hair and no freckles, and I hated them and wanted to be them at the same time. So I guess maybe that's I can relate to that kind of inconsistency. I find it very human.
I've seen it before. I'm very familiar with it, these sort of suggestions that whites are not human and that sort of thing, but then wanting to be a white person and then the Creator. I mean, that's a whole nother ballgame. We're not talking about just wanting to be a cute cheerleader. You're not saying that the cheerleader is God. I don't think. I didn't hear that when you were talking about
no, not quite. But if you've ever been a junior high girl, you'd know what I was talking about. But you haven't.
I have not. But again, I would even say your response. It's been my experience when white people are indicted, because you said this is an indictment of white people for their conduct, their practice of white supremacy, racism. It's been my experience that white people tend to get very defensive when they are indicted or accused of being racist collectively, individually. It's not something that they take well, generally. That's been my experience. And I just find that even more fascinating. Your response was not, being upset or what have you, that you thought this was great writing, that this was her just talking about the human experience.
It's heartbreaking. I mean, that's my response. I don't get defensive. I get heartbroken because of its truth, and I don't know what else to say. And I'm sorry that you have experienced so much defensiveness in response to that sort of thing. I mean, I guess that's the problem we're talking about, right?
Wow. Do you all on the campus of Liberty, because she says that repeatedly in the book, that God is white, Jesus is white. Do you all have any images, depictions of Jesus or God on the campus? And if so, what color are they?
Oh, I don't know of any. I don't know of any. You mean like paintings or pictures?
Correct. Either or.
Yeah. Yeah. No. We have a big picture of Jerry Falwell in the hallway. He's white. But no. Offhand, I don't know of any pictures that we have of Jesus.
Fascinating. Okay. Just the significance of Christianity, because that comes up a lot in the text as well. Where she's talking about religion, and they have even a lot. I mean, the book opens with a scene in church where she's wishing to be a white person and ends up having a kind of a childhood moment. This passage on page 131, and at least for me, I think Christianity and racism end up being intertwined pretty frequently.
What chapter are you? You just gave the page number. What's the chapter?
Yes, ma'am. This is chapter 18, and it's well, for me, it's page 131, but it's like the second to last page of chapter 18. It's kind of midway down the page where she says, they basked in the righteousness of the poor and the exclusiveness of the downtrodden. Let the white folks have their money and power and segregation and sarcasm and big houses and schools and lawns like carpets and books, and mostly, let them have their whiteness. It was better to be meek and lowly, spat upon and abused for this little time than to spend eternity frying in the fires of hell. No one would have admitted that the Christian and charitable people were happy to think of their oppressors turning forever on the devil's spit over flames of fire and brimstone. But that was the Bible, but that was what the Bible said, and it didn't make mistakes. And it ain't said somewhere in there that before one word of this changes, heaven and earth shall fall away, folks going to get what they deserved. I'm not sure. How does that play over to a white reading audience?
Well, again, I think this is really an indictment of the long-standing racism within American Christianity that that King talked about, the Sunday morning being the most segregated hour in the country. That's just wrong. So again, it's an indictment of the way that not only individuals have been racist, but how systemic racism has extended even into the church.
This to me seems like white folks are going to get theirs at some point for what they've done collectively. This seems like a massive indictment of not an individual white person, but of white people on the whole. Am I misreading that?
Right. No. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's not only racism is not only individual, but that it's systemic, right? And this, the fact that for so long, black people in America from slavery onward have had to look to the afterlife and to look to divine justice for justice, rather than having it here and now. That's just wrong.
What I had heard a lot about this text before I read it was the sexual abuse that Dr. Angelou experienced, and what a powerful point in the book that is, which it is, no doubt. We've covered that. What I found even more interesting, I'll play a quick clip, like 30 seconds. Dr. Angelou, she did many interviews apparently over the years with Bill Moyers, white male, and in one of their interviews, she was talking about the relationship between black females and white men. I'll play the quick 30-second clip, and then I'll ask my question. Context of white supremacy.
And I believe that we have to thank black women not only for keeping the black family alive, but the white family.
Why is that?
Because black women have nursed a nation of strangers. For hundreds of years, they literally nursed babies at their breast who they knew when they grew up would rape their daughters and kill their sons.
That's
a fact.
That's strong.
I know, but it's the truth, Bill. It's the truth.
Is that an accurate statement that we just heard from Dr. Angelou?
Absolutely. It's the horrifying truth. It's the horrifying truth that even, I don't know if you know about my other work, but my forthcoming book is a biography of a British abolitionist from the 19th century, and in it I talk about how even the slave traders and the slave ship captains who later became leaders in the Christian church participated in the routine raping of slaves on the ship cargo. And I have written before in our local newspaper about how I believe, even though the dominant narrative is that the Civil War, took place, that the defense of slavery was economic, and that was the big motivation of the Southern states to try to keep slavery. My argument is that even more than money, it was sex, because most of the slave masters had, these were not just laborers, these were sex slaves that they had. And this is the part of slavery that I don't think anybody, black or white, is talking about enough.
Definitely.
Are you talking about that?
We talk about the rape of black people on a regular basis. We just talked about
good.
Sally
I don't know your
Hemings.
show, so okay.
Right on. We just talked about Sally Hemings on our most recent
there you
broadcast.
go.
Before
there you
this
go.
year.
I mean, and again, I think because of the influence of Marxism in the academy today in universities, I know more about that than your earlier questions about the popularity of this book. Marxism has so influenced the academy and theories that have trickled down that everyone wants to interpret so many events in history through the lens of economics. And there's some, there is a place for that, but people, especially the secular liberal aspect population of the academy, does not believe in sin. They don't see sexual behavior as sin the way that Christians do, and so they kind of deny the sin, the sexual aspect. I believe that the sexual sin in slavery was the stronghold that was even more powerful than the economic motivation. That's just my theory.
Fascinating. Well then. My question.
I'm not an expert. That's just my. I've done a little bit of dabbling in the history, and I think I know human nature, and I just think it's something that's worth talking about more. And I'm glad you are.
I definitely think it's something worth talking about. In that vein, I'm not, as I said, I'm not an English professor. I don't have a degree or anything in English, but I am aware that there are a lot of books that are very popular in the academy that are on required reading lists for high schoolers, even college students. The Color Purple, Invisible Man, The Bluest Eye, Precious, This Text, for colored girls. Lots and lots of texts where there is a black rapist, sometimes even more than one black rapist. Lots and lots and lots of them. Given what you said, given what we heard from Dr. Angelou, if that is the history, if that is the relationship of the black female to white men in this area of the world and beyond, why are there not more texts where you have a white male rapist?
I don't know, because the works that you just mentioned are written by black women, so I don't know. Maybe it's because of the publishing industry, right? Which is controlled by whites, but I don't know. Publishing industry controls a lot, and it's not just about racist matters. Because there are a lot of, even literature that is more literary and less commercial has a hard time getting published. There are lots of problems with the publishing system. So,
Invisible Man is Ralph Ellison, black male, but the rest of them are black females. Do you think it would be more difficult to get a work published that was featuring a white male rapist?
I think maybe this day and age, not so. Some of the works that you mentioned have been around, for a few decades. So maybe at the time that those books were published, that would have been a lot harder. I'm not really an expert in that area as well, but again, that's really the more compelling foundational truth about the systemic racism, I think, is the rape of slaves by white masters, and the breakup of the slave families by white owners. We talk about the breakdown of African American families and communities, and ignore the fact that that's a pattern that was established from slavery by white people.
Fascinating. I do see some of our listeners have questions. I will check with them to see if they have anything they would like to get in. S. Did you have a question for Dr. Karen Swallow Pryor? Your line should be open.
Yes, good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I just had, I guess, two short questions. You did identify yourself as a white woman. Can you?
Well, the host did. I didn't. The host did.
Okay, but you agreed that you are.
Oh, I did. Yes, I agreed. Yes, I am. I'm also a Pisces, but he didn't ask that.
Okay. So just from your own personal experience growing up, because I'm classified as a black male, can you just share when in your growing up, in your developmental stage, you were made aware that you were a white female, and how did that come about, and what did that entail for you?
I guess I can't really remember. I can't remember when I identified as a girl or when I identified as white. I've never been asked that question, so I might think of something later, but I don't think that I don't have a conscious memory of it. It's a good question. What about you? When did you? Is that something that you can that you have an experience with in your forming your self-identity?
Well, I knew very early in life that I was considered a black male. I was pretty much called a nigger probably by the time I was 3 years old by several white people. So I knew very early in life that I was considered a black male. And watching television and things of that nature, it was pretty obvious that I was not, would not be accepted as a white male. Another question is, I know that you're at Liberty, and that is a Christian-based academic setting. And one of the things that I wanted to know is, why do you think that considering the Jesus character that is in biblical literature, with all of the so-called evidence that points to that any individual who would have been a historical figure named Christ at that time would not have been a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person, why do you think that Christians, and more specifically white Christians, continue to depict Jesus Christ in a manner that would be inaccurate or inconsistent with what's written in the Bible? And why do you think that's important?
Well, I do think it's important to not do that. I mean, Jesus was Middle Eastern. I mean, why did they do it? I mean, I think we're all prone to recreating God in our own image in some way or another, and so white people just have been able to perpetuate that myth because they've been the ones in power. So I think it's a human tendency. It's a wrong one, and I do think, among my Christian friends, my writer friends, and academic colleagues, we talk about this a fair amount, and we don't agree with it. And I don't know how much it's changing. I hope it's changing, even if just a little. I know I have there is an entire tradition within Protestantism of not depicting Jesus at all, some within the Reformed tradition don't believe in any visual portrayal of him, and this is one of the reasons why, because there are many ways that we can limit our understanding of Christ. Now, I'm not of that tradition, but I'm growing to respect it more and more for exactly the reason that you say, because we can put up so many walls when we try to, as I said, recreate God or Christ in our own image. And it's wrong.
And this is my final question. Do you believe that a person could function as a white person, whether they are classified as a white male or a white female, and be ignorant of what it entails to be a white person, and that person needing you or some other person to inform them about what racism is and how it works and how it operates?
Could you ask the question again? I'm not quite sure I understand it.
Okay, so do you believe that a person can function as a white person? Let's say a person is 18 years old, an 18-year-old white male or white female. Do you believe that a person can be an 18-year-old white male or female and be ignorant and uninformed of what racism is, how it works, how it operates?
Okay. It depends on what you mean by ignorance, because we can be ignorant through a variety of ways. We can be ignorant because out of total innocence, that we really have not been exposed to something. And we can be willfully ignorant or blind and deny things. We're complicated beings. I think most of the ignorance we all experience about most things that matter is kind of our own willful or semi-willful blindness. So I really don't think it's that possible to be ignorant of racism.
So you would agree that it's more than likely, or it's not possible for a young adult white person to be ignorant of racism. And so with that being said, so why, whenever incidents occur, which are often deemed isolated incidents, there seems to be this desire to provide white people with sensitivity training or some sort of race relations seminar or things of these natures, when white people could not be ignorant of racism? What would be the point of those seminars or that sort of sensitivity training or things of that nature?
Well, because we, again, I'm a professor, I'm an educator, I'm going to come at everything from that point of view. I could say that, you learn how to read when you're in second grade, so you don't need to learn any more, but here I teach reading at the college level. So people can be aware of something, but there's still so much more room for understanding and application, expansion of that knowledge. So, it's not like one is ignorant or not ignorant. I don't think it's that, it's that black and white, sorry to use those terms, but there are so many shades in between, so many ways that we can grow and expand, again, not only our knowledge, but even our application, because we can know things and still not apply them or live them or make them, and that's not just about racial issues, that's about many things. I mean, even the Bible talks about knowing what is right to do, but not doing that right thing. It applies to so many things in our lives. Like, I know I should eat a little bit more healthfully and exercise more, but I don't always do it. So there's always room for encouragement and growth. Does that answer your question? If I'm understanding it correctly, like there is a place for those things.
I don't think so, because what I'm specifically getting at is, it seems to be an exercise in futility that as a white male or a white female, these individuals would have been conditioned their entire lives to know what it means to be white, what is expected of them as a white person, how they are to function and operate as a white person in this society and beyond this society globally. And to then turn around and suggest, when an incident occurs where a white person is caught practicing racism and it becomes a news item and so forth, and then it becomes an item on the campus, and then the campus says, okay, well, we need to have a sensitivity seminar. We need to have a multicultural workshop. We need to talk about race relations. We need to convene a panel or a council to discuss this, and we need to send out newsletters and put up a website and have a blog. I mean, what would be the point of that if these people learned what it means to be white, what is expected of them to be white their entire life? What would really be the point of that?
Okay, I think I understand your question, and I'll try to answer it better. I mean, yeah, I will agree that I don't think those are the most effective means of stemming racism, workshops and seminars and so forth. I don't think workshops and seminars are the most effective means of doing much of anything. To tell you the truth, I have to go to a lot. So so I don't think that they are without value, but I certainly don't think that they are the most effective means. But I don't agree with you that people don't change by the time they're 18 in any respect. I mean, why would I be doing what I'm doing? I teach students who are 18 and older. They come to me conditioned with all sorts of issues and problems and preconceptions, and most of them are not as bad as racist attitudes. I'm not equalizing them. I'm just saying I believe in transformation. I believe in transformation in part through education, but more so I believe in transformation through the person of Jesus Christ. And that doesn't, Jesus Christ does not make people perfect instantaneously, but if I didn't believe in transformation and change, I would not be a teacher and I would not be a Christian. And so I don't share your lack of faith in the possibility of growth and improvement, and I'm sorry that you feel it's futile, but I respect the experiences that you had that make you feel that way, and I am sorry for that. And I understand that. I just disagree. I have more optimism.
Okay, well,
but I realize that's easy for me to say.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your answers.
Thank you for calling in and sharing your perspective. I appreciate it.
Our caller in Alabama, did you have a question for Dr. Pryor? Your line should be open. Last four digits, 9281. Did you have a question for Dr. Pryor? Line should be open.
Oh, sorry about that. I had two questions really. One was, I heard her say why, like you was naming those books like Precious and Color Purple and everything like that, and she said she wondered why, because those book writers were black women. And my idea on that probably could be that black women and black men, our mind has been altered to we kind of have the idea, have the same mindset of our oppressors. So our oppressors look at black men as rapists, so the victims of racism will have the same outlook on life as the oppressors. That's probably why the black men were rapists in those books instead of white men. And my second question would be, allegedly, it sounds like she allegedly is against white supremacy, also known as racism, allegedly. My question is, how does she feel about colonization? And not only how does she feel about colonization, what steps do she think her and her people are going to take to reverse colonization and probably give the land back to the victims of racism, also known as Native Americans? What steps are they making to give them their land back? And third question would be, how does she practice racism? And that would be my only three questions.
Well, I'm right here. I assume you're talking to me even though you said she, right? I'm a human being, even though if I were in Dr. Angelou's book, she might not have seen it that way when she was a youngster. So I'll start, I guess, backwards with your three questions. I don't think it's really up to me to say how I practice racism, because I don't think that if I have blind spots that I can't see, then someone, as much as I would want to recognize that, it would probably need to be something that's pointed out to me, if that makes sense. Because that's part of the problem, is that we don't often see how our behavior needs to be changed or corrected. I hope that I'm not being racist, but there could very well be some attitude or mindset or use of language that I have that I am not aware is racist. So I can't really answer that question for myself. But if someone thought that I were being racist, I would want them to tell me, just as I thought, if they thought I was being sexist or anything. And then secondly, colonization is something that happened in human history across the globe for centuries. It was how human beings existed. It's how some cultures continue to exist today. We have, for the most part, in the modern world, sort of progressed past that on some level, but it's not like we can go back and rewrite the pages of history. So taking that conversation.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt.
Uh-huh.
Y'all did that. Y'all did that for Israel. So don't say y'all can't go back and rewrite. Y'all gave Israel their land back, and those people weren't even from Israel.
That's an excellent point. You're right. So yes, it can be done. Of course, that's resulted in ongoing horrible wars. So even the attempt to redo that has not resulted in peace or contentment for the people involved. So I just have to honestly say I don't know how to fix the past. I don't know how to make reparations. I don't know. If I did or anyone did, it would be a lot easier. So I just have to honestly say I don't know how to fix the sins of the past of nations or countries or even just my own. I can't even fix my own sins of the past, and that's why I'm thankful that Jesus covers those things. And then I will have to ask you to repeat the first question because now I've lost track. So what was the first question?
The first thing was really a statement. It wasn't a question.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
You pretty much answered what I wanted to hear you say, and but I would like to also say though, if you can, a lot of times I hear people say that they are against racism and stuff like that, but to me, if you do not have any plans on reversing the colonial experiment done by the white supremacists, I really think you're not serious about racism until you start on the beginning of how you all came over here as illegal immigrants. And if you do not have any plans or if you're just looking at it as a pipe dream or something like that, like you said, it can't be done, but y'all did that for people who never even lived in Israel. Y'all did that for Europeans who converted to Judaism. So, and that was, that land been gone over 2,000 years, so don't say you cannot do that with America. I just don't think y'all are serious, and I think this is a lot of intellectualizing and BS about people's pain that they are going through from genocide because of white supremacist terrorism. And that's all I would like to say, and I'll mute my line. And thank you, ma'am, for commenting on my questions.
Thank you for calling in. I appreciate hearing your views.
Right on. I had two other questions I wanted to make sure I got in, make sure we don't get hit with time constraints.
Okay.
Number one, definitely since you brought up the issue about sex, I think anyone who's listened to this program, that is an issue we hit on a lot. I guess let me make sure I get the chapter. This is chapter 16, and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, where Dr. Angelou, she's talking about her experience working for Mrs. Cullinan, this white woman, or I guess her white family, but primarily with Miss Cullinan. And she writes, this is for me, it's the bottom of page 106, the last paragraph, where she says, when I spoke to Bailey about it, he agreed that I was right, but he also informed me that Mr. Cullinan had 2 daughters by a colored lady and that I knew them very well. He added that the girls were the spitting image of their father. I was unable to remember what he looked like, although I had just left him a few hours before, but I thought of the Coleman girls. They were very light-skinned and certainly didn't look very much like their mother. No one ever mentioned Mr. Coleman. My pity for Miss Cullinan preceded me the next morning like the Cheshire Cat's smile. Those girls who could have been her daughters were beautiful. They didn't have to straighten their hair. Even when they were caught in the rain, their braids still hung down straight like tamed snakes. Their mouths were pouty little Cupid's bows. Miss Cullinan didn't know what she missed, or maybe she did. Poor Miss Cullinan. Number one, when I read this, I said, Mr. Coleman is a rapist. Given what we have laid out in this time period, that it would be pretty much at the penalty of death for a black person, male or female, to defy a white person, white woman or white man. We hear earlier in the text the way that Dr. Angelou's grandmother is spoken to by poor white trash children, where they come in and make a mockery of her and her entire story, and she can't say anything about it. So certainly if this is a white man and a black female and he wants any sort of sexual activity with her, there is absolutely no way that she is going to be able to say no or resist or get rid of him. So he would have to be
no consent. Right.
Oh, see, we're in agreement on that one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not consensual. It can't be.
Given her history at this point in the book, we've already gone past the trauma she experienced being raped by a black male, Mr. Freeman, in St. Louis, and her coming back to Stamps, Arkansas. When she's telling this, and she said that she didn't really remember what Mr. Cullinan looked like, and even when her brother is telling her, well, you know, the children he's had with this non-white female, blah, 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 and she's talking about them. And I almost thought, given what I know, and particularly Danielle McGuire's book, At the Dark End of the Street, where she talks about how Rosa Parks was almost sexually assaulted by a white man, Fannie Lou Hamer, where she talks about this is commonplace, that if you're a black female, you could be raped by a white man, a continuation of exactly what you said, this constant onslaught of white rapists pursuing black females and black males. Do you think it's possible that Dr. Angelou could have been sexually assaulted by Mr. Cullinan?
Certainly. Certainly it's possible. I mean, I don't know. I mean, even autobiographies don't necessarily include everything. There are, you know, it's a crafted literary work. So I don't know what she left out. That stuck out to me. And I have no evidence. I'm reading, particularly as someone who is a sex abuse victim. We've had a lot of people who've come on and talked about sexual abuse, and they've said that once you have been sexually abused, that sexual predators, they tend to pick up on that. They know, oh, this might be an easier victim because this is someone who's already been subjected to this sort of thing. Definitely when you have the dynamics of a white male adult and a black child at this time period, that would have made it even easier. And that it stuck out to me, her saying that she couldn't even remember what he looked like. That almost sounded like that could have been some form of blocking or repressing something that was painful. I'm not saying it happened. I'm just saying that it stuck out. Right. No. That's actually some astute literary interpretation here. You weren't an English major, but I think that that's very interesting. That's a good reading of the text, I think, and it's not entirely unjustified.
Right on. Glad to get that out as well. You get
an A. You get an A for the.
Right on. Glad to get my A. Even within the context of this passage, though, because that's something that I've told folks to think about the entire time that we've been reading this, in terms of why this book is so popular amongst white readers, particularly in the academy. And for me, I tend to agree with our callers. I haven't seen any evidence that white people are serious about discontinuing the practice of racism. I have not seen any evidence that there's been a major change with regards to white people valuing black life and really making sure that, hey, people worldwide get the message that we're not about practicing racism anymore. We're not about mistreating black people, that is totally unacceptable, and that's old hat. We're done with that. I don't see any evidence of that at all. And in a passage like this, it stands out even more because I'm of the opinion, and we've even had some white authors on before. Valerie Jackson, she wrote Property, which is about slavery, same thing, and it focuses more on the white woman's role in slavery, even the white woman being a sexual abuser, which is something that I think is often left out as well. But I said, I think there's so many of these books. The Help, as I said, Color Purple, Beloved, there's so many of these texts, more of them coming down the pike, 12 Years a Slave, and they generally, a lot of them, they become very popular, if not made into films in the academy where people read them. And I said, I think because of the conditioning, the racism, white supremacy, and I don't see white people stopping this, I think many white people enjoy reading this sort of literature to kind of relive. It almost is the same purpose, I think, of the lynching photographs from the early 20th century, where you can kind of revel in a moment of white terrorism. You get that in a literary format, reading about these different stories of all these horrible things happening to black people and dead black bodies, and that being something that people can joke about and laugh about. Oh, this dead nigger, we're going to lock you up in there with them, and all of this sort of just terrorism, that's something that people can read and enjoy, and all of the pathologies. I think a lot of the black characters, you have a deadbeat black father, where she talks about her dad doesn't do a very good job parenting her and just kind of rides in and out of their lives at will and is willing to jettison her for some random girlfriend. I could just easily see how this would be something that would be very appealing to a racist. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, I can't imagine reading the works that way, and I can't imagine anyone that I know reading the works that way. And I'm sorry for whatever experiences that you've had that makes you sort of, lean that way, that people are reading this and reveling in this disgusting depictions of human behavior that actually existed and continues to exist. That's not something that I can imagine. That's not how literature is experienced in my classroom, and not just this kind of literature, but any kind of literature that conveys, the pain of human experience, because that's what great literature does. It helps to, it expresses the fallenness of our human condition, and if it's good or great literature, then it's going to offer some redemption. And so, I mean, I do understand what you're saying, and I can understand why someone might think that. There's we do have to be careful not to fetishize through art any kind of painful experience. I mean, anytime you create an artifact or a work of art, it becomes an object, and that's really what you're talking about. Even if it's not as blatant as what you described, there is something when we make something into an object that it turns it into an object, and we have to be careful that it doesn't become something that is an opportunity for us to dehumanize the other, and that can happen. I think that you've offered an important insight there, one that we have to be careful about. That it can't just be like, this great latest film just becomes, an entertaining thing to do on a Saturday night. It's very important that we treat these experiences as something more sacred than that. And I guess, my high view of art and literature, helps me to not, that's why, because I have that high view, that never occurred to me, but now that you're saying it, I can see how that could be, but I would not want it to be that way. And I don't experience it that way, and I don't teach that way. And I don't read literature and write literature for that purpose. That's a really powerful point. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would meekly submit this is, although I am not objective, I'm very biased. My experiences as a black person, as a victim of white supremacy, I bring that with my analysis of any reading, any text, any conversation.
Sure.
However,
Well, we all do that. We bring ourselves to the text, yeah.
Exactly. But even if I could, not saying that's possible, but even if I could set that aside, I could just look at the response to something like 12 Years a Slave, where I see the same thing, where this becomes, this is wonderful. We can go and watch black people being beaten for our Friday evening date movie, to go see 12 Years a Slave, or to read 12 Years a Slave. Or even if we want to make it contemporary, Fruitvale Station, same thing. We can go and watch the black person die. It's almost necrophilia, if you will, Black Death. We can go and enjoy death.
Pornography is a good parallel. There's a point where it becomes pornographic, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, right. And I mean, in a very literal sense, and she used the word pornographic because the sexual aspect is there in this, but it's frequently there in these black works. And as I said, the system...
I agree with you there, yes.
The system is still here, and even if I took 12 Years a Slave, because we did that for a book study session as well, when they made the movie of that work, they left out several portions where there are black people committing violence against white people, even where a black enslaved black person kills a white person for beating him. They left that out. They had no problem with all sorts of gratuitous violence of white people against black people, but they were very careful in editing away many of the other incidents of black people using counter-violence against their enslavers. And that, to me, further reinforces my point, because that's not me. That's not my view. It's just look at the movie and read the book. Now, what did they leave out? That right there tells me a lot about why this is so popular and what might be a driving force behind all of that, in addition to the fact that the problem has not been solved, which I think weighs more than anything. If we were really serious about this, why haven't we made more progress? Why, after we spent a whole summer talking about Trayvon Martin, now we ending the summer talking about Michael Brown Jr. and Ferguson? That, to me, just underscores the insincerity that I think many of the callers and myself have with regards to white people who allege that they're against racism, or even allege that they can make strides, make progress, they can learn, get rid of their blind spots, and solve this problem.
Well, if I can make a point from within my own bias, that is as a literature person, the book, which I've seen the film, but I actually didn't even know that it was based on a book. It sounds like the book did a better job of what and avoided the problem that you're talking about more. So I think in some respects, books, the written word, rather than the films, might be more. Again, that's my bias. I'm biased towards literature, even though I do appreciate film. The book did a better job, according to your analysis. I'm basing it on that, and the film did. So maybe books can help when they're rightly done.
If that were the case, again, I would go back to my original question. If that were the case, then I would think we would have a lot more books of white male rapists and white female
right,
rapists.
and maybe we will. And I know you and the other caller talked about a lack of. You have more pessimism than I do, and I'm not trying to be overly. I'm not Miss Optimistic Pollyanna. But I know to you, I probably appear that way. But where I put my faith, besides in my Savior Jesus Christ, is in the young people that I work with. I don't really think books or films or even discussions like this, even though they all help, or the workshops or the seminars, the most important thing is our relationships. And when I see white students and black students being friends, marrying one another, creating families together, pushing aside generations of racism. I mean, I do see hope in the future. I do see hope in the young people who are growing up in a different world. And I know systemic racism still exists, and I know it's a huge problem. But we did end slavery. So we've made at least that progress, and we have a lot more to go, a lot more. But it's progress. I mean, we can take hope in that. Can't we?
I will hush if you can give my callers. There are two other people that called in and had questions before you have to exit. But I will take two more calls and stay on for a few more minutes. Outstanding.
Really, this has been very okay.
Outstanding. The caller at last four digits 2456 2456. Did you have a question for Dr. Pryor? Your line should be open.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the comment she just made about we ended slavery. And because as I know it here today, the 13th Amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except for punishment for crime. That's supposedly what ended slavery. So with the exception of crime and the condition of involuntary servitude, I would like her to be more clear about how they ended slavery, racist white supremacists, European terrorists.
Are you there? Are we still on?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay. Yes. No, I didn't say who ended slavery. When I said we don't have slavery, I meant a collective we, not white people. I mean the human race in America anyway. I mean, obviously human trafficking still exists. So So I meant the institution of slavery as it existed in the southern states. I mean slavery is a word that has many different uses, so I meant specifically that form of slavery. Certainly the disproportionate number of African Americans in our prison system is another problem altogether, and enforced servitude through the prison system we could consider a kind of slavery, and so I'm not going to argue that. I just meant the other kind of slavery that was depicted in 12 Years a Slave. So I'm not saying that all the problems are over. I'm just saying, we at least outlawed that. Now,
right.
Yes, that's not a lot of progress.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Not trying to cut you off here, but what I'm saying is that if racist white supremacists were the ones implementing slavery on non-white people or black people, and then they give a clause that says there's an exception to slavery and that you could still be in the condition of involuntary servitude, how did they abolish slavery at all? I don't think it's abolished. I think it's just more modern.
Okay. I understand that. It's a different form of slavery.
Would you agree with that?
I'm saying that's a valid position to take. I mean, we have to define terms. Is involuntary servitude slavery? I mean, you could say it is, or you could define it differently. So
it is a type of slavery, involuntary servitude, because black people or non-white people still involuntarily shop at white businesses or have to observe white people telling them what the law is.
And so you would see that as
that's
equal
why Abraham Lincoln got killed.
You would see that kind of slavery as equal to being on the plantation and whipped to death.
Of course.
Okay,
of course,
I
because it was a plan B. It was plan B. Instead of having the slaves right there, they can go, think that they're free, but they're still slaves. That's involuntary servitude.
Oh, okay. I understand. I understand what you're saying. I actually think welfare is slavery too. So I understand what you're saying there.
I like your rhetoric, though. It's very sophisticated.
Well, thank you. I know you don't mean it as a compliment, but I'll just still say thank you.
I didn't think the welfare was... Okay, go ahead, Gus. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right on. Caller at 4223. 4223. Did you have a question for Dr. Pryor?
Hello, Gus. Hello, Justice, and to all the other callers, and to Dr. Pryor. Hello.
Hello.
I had a question. Just to go back a little bit on a comment that you made. You said some of the behavior or some of the things that you would see amongst your students, some of your black students and non-white students and white students kind of getting along, even sometimes marrying one another, how you see that as a type of progress. Is it possible for the non-white students to still converse and have dialogue and be nice to the non-white students and sometimes even marry? Is it possible for those acts to take place and the white students still practice racism? Is that possible?
Oh, sure.
Okay. And so would you still see that as progress if they're still able to?
It's not. It hasn't abolished the problem altogether. It's just progress. I mean, we can all be guilty. I mean, my husband can love me and and be sexist or something. I mean, he's not, but I mean, it's just we're complicated human beings. So I see there's progress, but it's not. It doesn't mean the problems are over. I just see it as some progress. I mean, races are the human. I'm a Christian, so I believe in the Bible as the Word of God, and the Bible says that God created man and woman. Doesn't say anything. I mean, He did not create races when He created the human race. We did that, right? We did that. So, it's just all melatonin, right? So, we can erase those differences over time, I think. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I think that there's progress being made. I hope that answers your question.
You gave a statement. I don't know if it was as clear. Maybe because I'm trying to definitely listen intently. As far as the progress is concerned, let's see. I heard you say something. I'm learning to just pay attention to words, and like Gus said, I know you have an appreciation for that, being in the field of study that you're in. You said that maybe over time we can erase those differences. So you're implying that erasing differences amongst one another is progress also?
Oh no, not all differences. I just mean like I'm just saying that our skin color is based on reproduction, and if you reproduce with all white people, you get more and more white. If you reproduce with another race, you get all the other race. But then you can mix it. If you reproduce with another race, then the racial lines diminish, and I think that's fine. I mean, because that's how we were created. We were created just as the human race. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a cultural construct. Right? Race is a cultural construct, is what I'm saying. But I don't believe in erasing all differences. I think that's what makes us a human, male, female, whatever. Somebody likes the Yankees and somebody likes the Redskins, and I don't believe in erasing all differences, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, I was just asking you to clarify the statement that you made about erasing differences.
No, I was just saying, thank you. Oh, thank you for calling in, and I appreciate the input and conversation.
Appreciate that. Misunderstanding. We have lollygaggers. Do you have time for one more?
Okay, I'll take one more. I think it's been a fruitful discussion. I know you guys don't seem to have much faith in progress, but I have faith, so I'll keep going. One more call.
6492. Last four digits, 6492. Do you have a question for Dr. Pryor?
Yes. Thank you for taking my call. I apologize. I arrived home a little late from work, and so I didn't get to hear the entire conversation, but I did get to hear the last few minutes, and I was a bit surprised. Now you are a Christian woman?
Yes.
Okay, and you said something about you think welfare is slavery?
Well, that was in the conversation with a caller who said that involuntary servitude is a form of slavery. And I said there are lots of different kinds. We could talk about slavery metaphorically or in different levels. And I said, that can become a form of slavery too, yes.
Well, if I recall, Jesus said a lot about, taking care of the poor, and that if you
yes. I don't mean welfare. Yeah, I don't mean welfare in the generic sense, like my looking out for your welfare. I just mean the way that the government, the powers that be, have run it, have made it into a system that I think oppresses people. And but that's very different. No, I believe we should definitely look out for one another's welfare and empower one another. And I just don't think the current system does that, unfortunately. Do you?
Well, I disagree in that there are, many people right now, because of the way the corporate system is run, shipping good jobs overseas because they can make more money.
Sure.
And leaving people homeless and jobless. These corporations are making more money than they've ever made before. And still, they don't have enough money to ensure that their workers that work for them every day, that actually make them the money to make sure that they can live at above a poverty level. They have no problem sending hardworking people down to the welfare office to get food stamps and Medi-Cal. And as a Christian myself, that breaks my heart. If there's one thing we need to stop, it's the corporate welfare, because these human beings
right.
are not taking anything from anywhere near what's being stolen by these corporations. And I'm ashamed you said that.
I agree. Right.
And I'm ashamed whenever I hear people, whenever I hear Christians say things like that, I'm very ashamed. There are people that claim to be Christians anyway.
Right. Well, yes, I'm talking about the system in place as it is now oppresses people by not allowing them to flourish economically. And I think that's, I think that is, we all can. And then when there are exceptions of people who are in need, then yes, we are to look out for one another, but I don't think that the current system does that.
So what would you have them to do?
Oh my goodness, I don't have that answer. I teach English literature, so I really don't have that solution. That was just a comment I made to the caller. So I'm sorry that I don't have the solution. I do see it as a problem.
Well, I think that it would be a Christian thing that if you see something as a problem, that you at least consider options for correcting it. Trying to think of ways to correct it, or at least.
Oh, I do. I'm not right. Yes, I certainly do try. I'm not prepared. To. I mean, I hope that we don't get to point out problem. We can't point out a problem unless we have a solution. Then we don't even begin to work on things. So.
Well, I think we do have a solution. Sometimes it is the government where rather than having people being hurt, sometimes it is the government. And sometimes the government is being manipulated by people that their only motive is greed. And I think we could represent Jesus much better condemning those people than the people that are desperate and have nothing else.
I agree. Your point is very well taken, and I appreciate that you called in and made it. You're very right. Greed is at the root of a lot of it.
Yes, indeed. So thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Appreciate that. Thanks for all the folks that called in. I guess a quick parting one. This is not a caller. Just person wrote in a question. They said, how effective is repenting for racism, white supremacy when the system still exists?
Well, I guess I'm not sure it would really be true repentance if that system still exists. Right? I mean, I don't really think we've come to a point of true repentance. I really don't.
Right on. I guess my final comment would be, I think it is a major deliberate act of racism, white supremacy. Anytime a white person talks about how much quote-unquote progress we have made with regards to racism, the perpetrators, they do not get to gauge progress with regards to making amends for their criminal acts. It would be the victims who get to determine the progress that has been made, and that's something that I see pretty consistently where it's white people, and these are individuals that I suspect that are probably racist, do a lot of talking about progress. And I think in any other scenario, if people are fond of bringing up sexism, they would not tolerate a group of men coming to tell women how much progress that we have made with regards to sexism. That would not be tolerated. If we were talking about child rapists,
I would.
Hang on. We would not tolerate a group of child rapists coming to talk to a group of children who have been molested and raped to tell them, well, we've made a lot of progress with regards to you having therapy and coming along with your abuse. That would not be tolerated. You said that you would allow men to do that. Most of the females that I know would not tolerate that at all. Generally,
it wouldn't be the final word.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
It would be the victims who get to determine that. And in my opinion, I think white people are very skillful doing that to say, well, slavery's been abolished and we don't have quote-unquote segregation. And even Dr. Falwell repented and, has changed his ways and what have you. And to me, that is totally unacceptable. White people do not get to define quote-unquote progress with regards to racism. And I think that's something that should be pointed out every single time that a white person opens up to begin that discussion with saying we've made a lot of progress. That is for the victims of racism, white supremacy to determine. Did you want to respond?
I just wanted to ask you if you think that any progress has been made.
I don't even use that term. I look at it, either the problem has been solved or it has not. I'm of the opinion, if we're talking about, if we were building a house and we started building this house in 1925 and it's 2014 and we're saying, oh my gosh, look at how much progress we've made, Dr. Pryor. Do you see that doorknob right there? That is stunning.
You think
look
this is like
stairs.
Building a house? You think black people, but you think black people are the equivalent of a house? Okay.
I'm saying no.
Well, I thank you for having me. I thank you for having me, and I do appreciate your point.
You're not understanding the metaphor at all. The house is getting rid of racism. Either we have racism or we don't. Either the house is built or it's not. I'm not interested. If we started this process so long ago, which shouldn't have been here in the first place with regards to racism, either it's done or it's not. I see no point at all in going increments. Oh, we've made this much progress. We've made this much progress. We've made this much progress. Either it's taken care of or it's not. That is my assessment of the problem. I don't even use the word progress. As long as we still got to talk about Michael Brown and Ferguson, the problem is still here. At any rate, thank you kindly.
I thank you for having me.
What is the article?
May I be heard? Just one thing regarding repentance. Biblical repentance requires reparation. Okay, it's not just you say you're sorry and walk away. You say you're sorry and you right the wrong you've done.
I agree.
What is the article that you wrote with regards to the need to talk about rape and slavery? Is that something that's publicly available?
It was a letter to the editor in the local newspaper, and I don't know if it's online, but I have a print copy.
Oh, I
would you like me to send it to you?
Yes. I would like to check that out.
Okay. Well, just email me your mail. You know where I can mail that to you. I have it in my files. I'm 99% sure I have a copy in my files.
Outstanding.
It was so long ago.
I will do that today.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having me.
Enjoy the discussion. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Dr. Pryor.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Evening. Context of White Supremacy. Dr. Karen Swallow Pryor. We will see if folks have any feedback. That is one thing that really burns my grits. I do not like it when folks interrupt once I am talking. I do make time for folks. If you have comments that you want to get in, what have you, I cannot stand that. Just an FYI for listeners, I hate that. Folks, I don't even like it when guests interrupt me. Truth be told, I try to be a little bit more tolerant at times when they do it, but I really hate it when the callers start that yelling out and stuff when I'm in the middle of talking. I do give folks an opportunity to make their point and what have you before they run, particularly if they don't have a question. If it's just a statement, you can get that in at whatever point. At any rate, we will take a commercial break. I did have, it's unrelated to this, so I guess I have to do it. We'll do our commercial, and I'll give folks an opportunity if you have anything that you want to get in related to Dr. Pryor, what you heard during the course of the exchange. I will send her my mailing address today if she mails me the document that she wrote, which I think it would have to be the News and Daily Advance, I would think. That's the Lynchburg paper that I know well. If she mails it to me, I'll make sure to read it on air so y'all can see what she had to say. I'm kind of surprised that they even put that in the paper. I'll check to see if it's available online. I'll post it if I can find it, but that would be a while, an eye raise for me. Anyway, but I'll play the commercial. I'll give folks an opportunity to make any comments that they have about what they heard from Dr. Pryor, and then I had unrelated commentary to make sure I got in as well. We will be right back once we get our commercial on. Just hang tight. Context of White Supremacy.
I started to believe I'd never find anyone. Doubter tried to convince me to give in. Said you can't win. But one day the sun came a-shining through. The rain had stopped and the skies were blue. And oh, what a revelation to see. Someone was saying I loved you to me. On one in a million chance of a lifetime, and life showed compassion and sent to me a stroke of love, all to you. A one in a million you.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas, to Europe, to Australia, to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past. It is our current reality. Be informed. Be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs? Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at trimultimedia.com.
Hi everyone, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed, packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, to be able to invest in my counter-racist efforts, co-hosting the C.O.W.S radio program, please visit my blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
I got an uncle real crazy. My Uncle B, 55 years old, hates white people, married to a white lady. And he sit around going, you know, these crackers ain't shit, except for Susan. And he tried to explain the whole thing to me one day, say, yeah, I got a white wife, I love her, she love me, that's all that matter. But I tell you this, if the revolution ever come, I'll kill her first. Just to show these crackers I mean business. Motherfucker, cracker ass, motherfucker, cracker. Shit, cracker, motherfucker. What? Hey, hi, honey. Motherfucker, cracker, I'll kill my cracker kid, too.
The cows. Right on. That's pretty much a microcosm of my spring and summer 2014. Enjoying watermelon and singing Larry Graham. I have terrorized the whole neighborhood, singing 1 in a Million. I'd said before, you can get immediate, consistent obedience from your offspring. You can sing or play Larry Graham, 1 in a Million, and they will comply immediately. I have seen this over and over and over and over again. It is time tested, approved, works brilliantly. And I had thought about that in a counter-racist context. This was a great illustration when there are white people, most likely racists, who are clowning and they're talking about progress and they're not racist and, you know, they're all down and we need to all marry and have children together and that'll solve everything. Just to have Larry Graham playing in the background, I was like, that, in my opinion, rightly ridicules the folly, even though it is racist, not to be, you know, taken lightly, but I mean just to ridicule it as such, as just totally absurd nonsense. That, you know, when they start doing that, to just have 1 in a Million playing in the background, like out of all the white people in the universe who are about gunning down and saying that we are Darren Smith and we want to make sure he has $1 million so he can retire in the lap of luxury for gunning down an unarmed black teen, and the same thing that they did last year, and making sure Mr. Holesclaw, the white male who raped, they said he allegedly raped at least 8 black females. Now he's got like $10,000 or more just over a 3-day period. Out of all the white people in the universe practicing racism, terrorizing us, we have a white person who's, hey, I'm not on all that. I believe in hope and change and progress and interracial babies. Woohoo! That rightly, you deserve a little Larry Graham in the background, 1 in a Million, that we have you, just for the folly that it is. But I never think of it when I'm in a serious mode. I always think of it when I'm being silly and terrorizing children. I never think of it like, oh, man, wait a minute, I need to make sure I have this ready to roll when we have a white person on the program. And I didn't even think of it today. If I had thought of it in advance, I would have played it while she was on the air when she was talking and giving some of the folly that she gave us while she was here. At any rate, I definitely do not want to minimize the point about the rape during slavery. I did think that was important. As I said, white people, they tend to be very informed about racism, white supremacy. They're not interested in ending this system at all. That is obvious, even from what we got today. But they are very informed. The problem is not that white people are ignorant about racism. They don't need any refresher courses or remedial packets on what racism is and how it works. But I did think that that was extremely significant, and I am going to hop on that today to drop her my mailing address to see if we can get the paper that she wrote to the News and Daily Advance. If I can find it online, I'll post it as well. But I did think that that was very important. Even her time, that's another one I've said before. Sometimes white people, they generally are kind of condescending when they talk to another non-white person about racism, white supremacy, and implying directly or indirectly that you don't know what you're talking about, or you're absurd and you're an extremist, you're radical, militant, that sort of thing. Sometimes you'll get the opposite, where they will be flattering and saying, oh, you get an A for your analysis. No. Just, you know, kick all that to the curb. I'm talking to someone who's likely a race soldier. Kick all that to the curb and just keep it moving. You are not looking for validation from anyone with regards to your viewpoint on racism, white supremacy. Just evaluate what they have to say. Does it make sense? And what are you learning about white people, racist woman, racist man, racist child? I would hope, I don't know how much people know about liberty. I know a little bit more about that environment just because that's where I was born. But, oh man, Jerry Falwell, I mean, woo, you talk about race soldier. It is very rare when you stumble upon a white person that you don't get any pushback from most white people where they just, oh, yeah, that was a racist. That is very rare. Jerry Falwell is one of those in that category where you generally will not get a lot of pushback where white people say, oh, yeah, he was a racist. Unless I have been misinformed, we're talking about a white person who put a padlock on church doors to keep Negroes out. Unless I've been misinformed, among many other things. As I said, he labeled Bishop Desmond Tutu as a phony. You heard in the introduction his staunch opposition to Dr. King, didn't think he was an upstanding citizen worthy of a holiday. This is the founder of the university that Dr. Pryor is affiliated with. I don't even know if I could teach at such an institution given his background. He only died very recently. I think he died within like the last, I think 2007, unless I am misinformed. And I know quite a few black people who graduated from there, who teach there even, and I would tell them the same thing. I don't think I could work at this institution even as a janitor, given what I know about Jerry Falwell. I think black self-respect might prohibit me from being employed in such an institution, but that is the system of white supremacy. If anyone has comments they would like to share, feedback from what they heard from the guest, I will open up the lines if folks have anything that they would like to get. And I can even hear the pushback. Do you think you could find an institution that does not endorse racism, white supremacy? I severely doubt it, but you got to make a line somewhere, and that would be a line for me. I could not work for Jerry Falwell's institution. Any of the folks that had a hand up, did you all have anything you wanted to share?
Can I be heard?
I heard both of you.
I'll let him talk, and then I'll probably comment later on. I appreciate that, brother. Appreciate that. I didn't mean to say brother. I found it very interesting that she had used that, we end slavery comment. And, when I had got back with her on that and used the 13th Amendment, she kind of started talking about how welfare was some type of slavery too. And I just feel like she was, basically just using a lot of rhetoric to kind of throw you off of the subject, you know what I mean? Because, she changed her mind one time when Alabama said something to her, and then she made a comment like, hey, we ended slavery, but then slavery's not ended. And I just found that to be very interesting in how she positioned her words or sequenced them with the welfare type of hit at me when I was talking to her about the 13th Amendment and involuntary servitude and all the exceptions for punishment for crime. And I just found that interesting how racist white supremacists use their rhetoric, which they did not teach in school like that to everyone. And or they didn't teach you every degree of rhetoric. We know simile and onomatopoeia and stuff like that, but we don't know every degree of rhetoric. And I just found it interesting that they try to use that against us a lot.
No.
So that's all I had to say.
Right on. Any other folks have things that they wanted to get in?
Yes. The comment I probably would like to make was, I know it was kind of off track of the subject because it was about, Maya Angelou's book and everything like that. And but the thing I had, the reason I brought up the colonization thing is that I believe that topic, when it comes to white supremacy, I believe they try to say they're against racism, but they try to leave, let's give this land that we stole back out of the whole conversation. And and I remember you had a guest on one time who was an open racist. And, he was telling the truth. He was like, no, that's not part of the plan at all. So, you can get that out your mind. And so I kind of felt it was like a good idea to just,
keep bringing that up every time I run into one of those alleged anti-racists. You see what I'm saying? And then as you saw what she said, she was like, well, no, that's not possible. We can't go back and redo what we already did, But then I said, well, what about Israel? Oh yeah, wow, well, yeah, that's a good idea. But this is a person with a doctorate degree, and I'm just a person with a high school diploma, so I don't think that she's so foolish she don't even know about Israel. It's just the fact that she just really shucking and jiving. That's what she is doing, shucking and jiving. And you see what I'm saying? So, the whole thing is about, like, her trying to say, well, no, that's never been heard of. Come on. Going back and giving back something you stole. And so that's like me. If we as people gonna really be serious about racism, we gotta look at it like, hey, you just stole my car radio. Okay, I understand that sorry that you stole my car radio, but come on, you ever thought about giving it back? Is there any steps what are y'all doing to do this? You all are getting out, making steps and doing, plans of action to make it all right for people to have homosexual relationships. You see what I'm saying? Everything. Let gay people get married and all that, but when it comes to the downright thing of ending it, they ain't doing nothing. You see what I'm saying? And so I just mute my line, but that's all I want to say.
Great point. Great point. Totally agree. There any other folks have anything they want to get in? Right on. Let's see. Any other folks have anything they wanted to get in?
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to apologize for interrupting. I thought you were done, and I would never do that deliberately, but I just didn't want her to get away with, some of the things that I had the opportunity to hear her say. And so they have this, like, warped sense of what it means to be a Christian. And that's why I wanted to remind her that, or just like the previous caller says, you're supposed to go back and right the wrong. You're not supposed to just say, I'm sorry, and just, you're good with whatever you did. And, I always find it interesting talking with them. A lot of times they get mad at me and, don't want to talk to me anymore, but I just feel, that this is kind of almost something I feel strongly about, that, that they need to be corrected when they get out of line. And again, I apologize.
They're out of line all the time, every day, every hour. White people are not. They're not going out of business of terrorizing black people. That is painfully obvious. I hope that stood out more than anything with what Dr. Pryor had to share. And she, having a doctorate in English, I've long said white people are very skillful in their use of words. And particularly, I think the white people who study English, they tend to be very informed and particularly able to speak in a manner either to cause confusion, not answering questions. I think she did a lot of that as well in not answering questions or just saying that she's not informed about this. I can't answer that. I'm not informed about this. I can't answer that question. Or the redirect, I think she did a lot of that as well, where you ask her a question and then she turns around and asks you the same question that you just asked her, as opposed to giving an honest answer to the question. That's pretty typical of what white people will do. I did want to make sure I got in as well. I discontinued. I used to say myself the term shucking and jiving. I used to say it up until very recently, and I stopped using it because I didn't know what it meant. I know people use it generally to mean that you are messing around or being deceptive in some manner, but I didn't like the etymology of the term. Like, when did people start saying that, and you know, just the term shucking and jiving, like, where did that come from? And I looked it up, and it reads, according to linguist Barbara Ann Kipfer, the origins of the phrase may be traced to when enslaved black people sang and shouted gleefully during corn shucking season, and this behavior, along with lying and teasing, became a part of the protective and evasive behavior normally adopted toward white people. According to the 1994 book by Clarence Major, Juba to Jive, a dictionary of African American slang, shuck and jive dates back to the 1870s and was originally Southern Negro expression for clowning, lying, pretense. And I said, wow, if this is accurate, if this goes back to behavior that was used to, or words that were used to describe enslaved black people when they were being terrorized and forced to work without compensation for white people, I don't know if I want to continue using this term. So I just kind of stopped from that point. So when I saw that's kind of the origins of the term, I feel like I can pick out better terms to figure out when a white person is being deceptive and most likely just practicing racism. Plus, I kind of feel like if that's what that term has been used for, and I do see white people reference black people in that way and saying that they're shucking and jiving and make it seem like they're just playing around or goofing off. I feel like that's kind of disrespectful to my family, black people, non-white people who were being terrorized and forced to just slave for white people. So that's why I don't use the term, but that's me. That's my part of my code. At any rate, unless I missed anybody, does anybody had anything else they wanted to get in about Dr. Pryor?
I would like to say probably one more thing. I suspect that she is a racist, and I don't think that was stated yet, so I just wanted to say that, just to throw that into the conversation, you know.
For sure. In complete agreement. I will reckon.
Hey, Gus, could I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Man, you had me laughing on that Joan Rivers post, man.
Oh, yeah.
But, you said good riddance to bad rubbish. Because she was a very nasty person herself, from what I heard. Like, nasty comments she done made, you know?
Amen. She just ridiculed First Lady Michelle Obama and said she was a good dresser for a man, and she at the same time was making some sort of disparaging, most likely racist comments about President Obama. This was recent. I think this was within like the last month or two. This was something this summer where she just did that. So yeah, I have no sympathy for her. Robin Williams, get out of here. Make room for some other folks. Peace. No tears. No nothing. Good riddance to bad rubbish, as I said. I think one of our listeners had asked if there were either some documents or if someone has given a lecture or just any information talking about non-white people, black people specifically, and the contamination where we feel really bad and we'll mourn and grieve for a dead white person and feel bad for them, as opposed to thinking, oh, this is one of our enemies has kicked the bucket, right on. Keep it, or at minimum, being totally indifferent about it at all. Like, we don't have any tears. There's nothing to celebrate. There's nothing to jump up and down about. Like, continuing with the program, moving forward. And I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head that specifically related to that with regards to a white person dying and us being really shook up about that and showing just how we've been, the white identification where we've been victimized. I couldn't think of anything off the top of the head that's dealing specifically with white death. But if anybody knows of such a document or video or lecture or book, that would be cool. it's not none of the folks online. If you find such a document or you know of such information, you can email or put it on my Facebook page or whatever the case may be, whatever will work best. Right on. Cool. Just got a message as we were rolling too. But yeah, that's something you can pay attention for as well. If folks, I don't know if Joan Rivers will resonate the same way that Robin Williams. I think there were a lot of victims, a lot of black people who seemed like they were really at least going through the motions of being shook up, or they were harmed in some kind of way about Robin Williams. I don't know if that'll be the same case for Joan Rivers. I certainly hope not. But yeah, that's definitely something to kind of keep an eye on. White identification might be up a bit if folks are going through some motions about Joan Rivers. One other, I guess, tidbit I can pass along. If folks heard this Sunday, we were on the air. Jaya Sundaresh, she was on the program, non-white female. She classifies as Indian, South Asian American. She was on the program Sunday morning, very early Sunday morning, like 4 a.m. my time Sunday morning. She was 90 minutes late, but she was here. It was interesting to hear her comments on anti-blackness and how non-white, non-black people think about black people and racism in total. The sex thing did come up, as I said, Sally Hemings. We were talking about that towards the end of the broadcast, about the incorrectness of sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people. She said she was resistant to what we had to say about that subject matter, and she conceded that she was in a sexual relationship with a white male for 6 years. Even though it seemed like they had broken up or they were not together any longer, but she had been in this relationship for 6 years, which is a pretty lengthy amount of time, particularly for a younger person. I think she's under 30, so she's a younger person to have a 6-year relationship with a white guy. That's, massive. But she emailed me, I think 2 days ago. So this was, I guess, two days after she'd been on the program. And she's in India right now. That was part of the reason that she was not able to stay till the end. She had a plane to catch this past Sunday going to India. And she emailed me and she said that she had been thinking about what we talked about on the conversation, and she wanted to continue the dialogue, that she had been kind of going over some of her previous views and things she had experienced, and was maybe making some reevaluations, which I thought was interesting. Contrary to what Dr. Pryor says, I definitely think change is possible, but the change is going to have to be on the non-white side of the chessboard, not white people. But I did think that was interesting, and I told her if she wanted to come back on the program to continue the dialogue, I'm sure folks would enjoy hearing more details. I know some of the listeners had additional questions about anti-blackness in India and that part of the world, as well as her thoughts on the bedroom integration piece that Dr. Pryor thinks is going to solve this problem. So that's definitely a good update to hear. I know we were talking about the Mindy Project. I had not seen that show. I don't, thankfully, now that Breaking Bad is over and done, I don't have a whole lot of television programs that I watch. I think the only shows, I think S. Dot, who's with the T, recommended that I watch, I think it was Homeland. It was one episode of Homeland, and I checked that out, and then I think some other people had recommended House of Lies, Kevin Spacey Netflix series, to check that out as well. And I don't think I don't even know if Homeland is coming back on, but I haven't seen that in months, and I think House of Lies is not back on either. So I don't really have television shows that I'm watching. I refuse to watch Scandal and like the rest of the nonsense that's on. But the Mindy Project, she mentioned it was brought up because the non-white female, Mindy Kaling, she's a non-white, non-black female, so-called Indian. She got nominated for an NAACP Image Award, and she was saying that she didn't think it was deserved. We talked about this on the broadcast. I'd never seen the show, never heard of it, so I took a moment just to watch one of the episodes. And I talked with another listener, and they said, oh, wow, they had heard of it. I think they had seen some of the episodes, and they were like, racism does come up in that show every now and then. That is something that they talk about directly. And she, too, was surprised, like, wow, I can't believe this show got an NAACP Image Award because they don't really have any black characters in it. And the only black character is in it is kind of this really stereotypical black female, that it's nothing, that makes black people look good. This is nothing that is making progress with regards to racism. At any rate, I watched a half of one episode, they get to a point. She's a gynecologist. She gets a patient who I think is a non-white female. She doesn't have insurance, and so she's like, I really don't want to take you because you don't have insurance, but I'll do it. So she accepts her as a patient. When she leaves, she goes out to tell her receptionist, one of whom is definitely a white woman. It might be that they're both white. And she says, you all want to see me succeed. Don't give me any more patients who do not have insurance. You know, make sure everybody we get has insurance, and that way we'll get paid and our practice will take off. And she says, we need white patients. And they look at her and they're like, you know, do you want it to be that explicit when we're saying we take in white patients? And she's like, oh, no. And then she stops and she nods, yes, white patients. That's what we want, white patients. And I was just like, wow, that is incredible for a show nominated for an NAACP Image Award. And I mean, with all the constant dialogue about health disparities, and we had Dr. Vernelia Randall on the program, Black female, her book Dying While Black, where she talks about how Black people have the worst access, the people who are being most terrorized have the worst access to health care. And then all of the inequality, Harriet Washington, her book Medical Apartheid, and just a book on top and documents on top of each other about all of the nasty things that happen to Black people. And then you've got this funny ha-ha show saying, yeah, we only want white patients. That's how we'll be successful. That's how we'll take off. We don't want any non-white patients. Make sure it's all white people that we want to be working from, even coming from the mouth of a non-white physician. I thought it was I paused. I stopped. I didn't even continue watching any more of the show. I would not encourage anyone. I'm not putting it out there saying that, yeah, you need to watch this show, because I think there are many seasons. I think it's been on for 3 or 4 seasons, so it seems like there are a lot of episodes. So I'm not saying you got to watch this or this is counter-racist viewing. I followed up on what was mentioned on the program, and it is indeed the racism, white supremacy is ubiquitous. On that note, I will make my transition, because I did have one other thing I wanted to get in before the program concludes. With regards to Ferguson, since everyone is talking about that, and we, I think, have spent a good chunk of time talking about that as well. I even had some listeners offer a few suggestions that I thought were constructive that people in that area and other areas might want to implement if they think it makes sense. And we also had people who were, again, asking for local contacts. So now we have extended beyond the U.S. borders. So if you're in Canada, Canada is pretty massive. I probably should have asked for specifics, because I don't think if you're in Vancouver, you're going to be able to hang out with other victims, listeners who are in Toronto. But if you're in Canada, maybe you can put Canada contact in the subject, and then you can elaborate about specifics in terms of where you are to see if that's feasible. But there are folks in Canada who would like to connect. I think we have Ohio, New York City, Washington, D.C., Florida, California, Southern Florida. That's another big one, too. Southern Florida. With California, it's Bay Area, California thus far, although I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of listeners in other parts of California. I think those are the place, Washington State. I think those are all of the places I know of right now. If you are interested in contacting listeners who are in your area to see if they might want to meet in person or grab a cup of coffee or what have you, just drop me an email and just put the geographic location in the subject. So NYC contact, Ohio contact, Florida contact, etc. And I can forward information along to other folks who are interested. At any rate, with everything on Ferguson, there was one other, what I thought was critical aspect that popped up in all of this. In much of the dialogue and conversation that I've seen around Ferguson, there have been, anytime you get, a situation that forces a lot of Black people, non-white people to talk about racism, for me it's interesting, because one of the things that I noted when I first started studying seriously racism, white supremacy, there were people that I thought were a lot less confused. Like, I thought they were on it. They really know what racism, white supremacy is all about, and they got it. And then as I started to study more, I was like, oh man, they are more confused than I thought. And it wasn't a put down or something to go bash them and call them names. If anything, it was more of, oh man, this problem is much worse than what I originally suspected. And that has kind of cropped up again with the Ferguson thing, and seeing a lot of black people coming out and talking about racism. And it reminded me, I know the context of white supremacy, and Gus specifically, we are hated by huge swaths of people, white people and non-white people, which is to be expected. This is not, about making friends. I don't really care if people are upset with me or if they don't like the program. I think I am known for saying, if you like the program, so what? If you don't like the program, so what? And if it's specific to Gus, if you do not like Gus T. Renegade, so what? Replace white supremacy with justice. That is the goal, not to make buddies, pals, homies along the way. But that was one of the things that I saw early on with regards to why I thought Tim Wise, and really a lot of these white people, I wouldn't put Dr. Pryor in the same category because I don't think a lot of people know who Dr. Pryor is, unless you're at Liberty University or maybe in Lynchburg or what have you. I doubt most non-white people know who she is. The reason that I've said Tim Wise, and to a certain extent Jane Elliott, some of these other folks, are so dangerous is that when you really get serious, you really say, hey, racism is a problem. I'm admitting that it is a problem, and I want to learn more about this. I want to know what it is and how it works beyond a superficial level of thinking about this. I want to read some material on this. I want to see if there's some documentaries, if there are articles on this. I want to get a better grasp of the concept of racism. I said years ago, almost I think when we first started out, that I think it is a gargantuan problem and a major act of racism that one of the first names you will hit, if not the first name, is going to be Timothy Wise. And I think that it's toxic, it's racist, and it's detrimental for a plethora of reasons. I can elaborate, but that came up big time during everything that happened with Ferguson. Not that I was surprised to see him on CNN again, because that happened last summer. That, I expect that. But the way Timothy Wise came up, and I know folks have said, that some people have said that they too had drunk the Kool-Aid, that they were confused, and that they thought Timothy Wise was the greatest person in the history of the universe until they heard him on the cows, until they got a better understanding of racism, white supremacy, and then they reevaluated, which I think is hugely important. This is a sound clip I will play, and this, I'm confused myself. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm not bashing on another victim. I'm just playing it to make the point, to illustrate what I'm talking about. And this is not the only person. That's why I say it's not even an individual indictment, because he's not the only person. This is an interview that he's known as a rap artist, hip-hop artist, Killer Mike. He's a black male. Names are important, too. He did an interview on The Breakfast Club last week, and they were talking about Ferguson and racism. Fascinating segment, and even for me more so for a variety of reasons you'll hear as the clip unfolds. But one of the non-white males who hosts The Breakfast Club, he was saying at the beginning, he said when everything kicked off with Ferguson, there were two people he wanted to hear from. One of them was Killer Mike. The other one was David Banner. Both of these individuals referenced Tim Wise with regards to their analysis of Ferguson over the past 3 weeks or however long since everything about this has unfolded. And that for me further solidified why it is important that people point out the danger of admitted racist Tim Wise and really make an effort to make sure that more non-white people are aware of, in my opinion, number one, that this guy is an admitted racist. I won't use the term shucking and jiving, but I mean, man, when you talk about white people who are skilled with rhetoric and giving the appearance that they are against racism, white supremacy, no one does it better than Timothy. No one. I'll play the segment and give my feedback if anybody has any other comments they want to get in or anything they want to make sure they get off their chest before we conclude. We'll have time for that as well. But this, again, it was on The Breakfast Club about a week ago. Killer Mike giving his views on racism, white supremacy. He is a victim, so no critique of him, but just listen to what he has to say, and once it concludes, we will be right back. Context of White Supremacy.
Real people, real celebrity, real talk.
Join the Breakfast Club. Blast off in your Weekday morning, 6 to 10.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest friend to the room.
One of my dogs, one of my favorite MCs of all time.
Killer Mike.
Mike Bigger, whatever you want to call him.
Whatever you call him.
Just don't call him Broken Ignorant.
How y'all doing?
Sir? Good morning.
Let me get this gum out of my mouth.
I know, thank you. I would have had to hand you some paper myself.
Thank you. Thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely. It's funny, since last week, it's two voices I really wanted to hear from. I wanted to hear from Mr. David Banner and yourself.
Thank you.
So what do you think about what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri?
Before you went there, I ran into him in the club last night. He was performing Run Your Jewels.
Run the Jewels.
Run the Jewels.
And I seen him and I said, you got to come by the show tomorrow. He was like, well, I'm leaving. I'm like, you got to come by the show. He was like, all right, whatever, I'm coming by.
He did. He did. Envy's the man. Last time people thought like me and Envy like won the man. Like Envy's my man. 100%. I love him to death.
Why would they think that?
Just because we be going back and forth. Because he's a great devil's advocate. But man, I wasn't passing up the chance to come hang out at the Breakfast Club.
Word.
I think that if you really want to know my purest and rawest of thoughts,
of course we do.
I'd encourage you to go to my Instagram, Killer Mike GTO. It got picked up by Spin and Billboard, but I just wrote my thoughts. Okay. And at the end of the day, like, my first thought is, we're all human beings. Like, I don't care what nationality you call yourself. I don't care what race you call yourself. You know, genetically, we all come from a small group of people that were indigenous to Africa that found their way out, and some stayed and populated this great earth. And we are human beings. And if we've reached a level in this country where we lack the sympathy and the empathy to sympathize with a child that lied dying on the ground face down in the summer heat for 4 hours, if we lack empathy and all we have is apathy to give that, then we've lost a bit of our humanity. And that's the most troubling thing, I think. And my second thought was Billboard contacted me and asked me to further expand on my thought. And it was hard. Like, I didn't want to do it at first. I had been partying with Envy, drinking champagne and doing stuff I shouldn't have done, and while remaining totally chaste and faithful to our wives. But I got
ratchetness and righteousness.
You got to know that. Righteous ratchetness. Yeah. But I popped up about 4 in the morning, and I just, my father was a police officer when I was young, and I just wrote that, really what I'm disgraced by is that Americans have gotten to the point where we're so comfortable choosing sides. Well, I'm black middle class, I'm white middle class, I'm working class, I'm poor. We've gotten conditioned to pick these boxes to the point that we don't see the brutal and real truth before us. I don't care if you argue that kid was a thug. I don't care if you argue black on black crime. I don't care any of the senseless arguments you have that you argue. An American's constitutional rights to due process were eliminated with those 6 bullets. I am an American. I am promised a certain amount of rights by the Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. And any time a policeman puts me in a chokehold and ignores me saying I can't breathe and I die in front of cameras, in front of other Americans on the New York streets, or a child dies in the streets of a suburb of St. Louis, all of our rights are affected. It makes all of our rights easier to trample on. And I think that as Americans, if we don't pay very close attention to the rights that we're losing, it's now easier for a policeman to come in your home. I could be in your home that you pay for, cops come knock on the door, and there was a time when they would say, is the homeowner here, can we come in? And you had the option without warrant. They didn't have a warrant to say yes or no. Now, just by me being in your house, I can say yeah and invite them into your house. So that is a loss of constitutional right. That's a step backwards in terms of the rights that we're awarding in this country. And I travel the world. Like, I know a lot of people, you might not hear me on 105 every day, but I do about 180 shows a year, and I travel the world. Everyone in the world finds the rights in this country amazing, the freedoms that you have, and we take them so for granted. So my outrage is first and foremost at our lack of empathy and humanity, our lack of sympathy for this mother and this child in these social conditions that make children, not just black children, children, because kids who are skateboarders get harassed by cops, that make children an enemy. And furthermore, I'm appalled by our apathy as Americans that we're not all up there fighting for our constitutional rights. I'm encouraged by artists like Tef Poe and Rocky Knuckles in St. Louis because they're on the ground providing footage that they're not showing you. Rachel Maddow talked last night about they've essentially made a no-fly zone for media. Media usually is able to have a helicopter to shoot down to show what's happening, and you could have saw Rachel Maddow Metal said the cops were pushing protesters into other cops, which created an element of tear gas and violence, right? Jeff, Poe, and Rocky, the only guys down there on ground level showing, well, there's many others, but showing that there's a diverse group of people. There are Buddhists down there. There are Holocaust survivors down there. There are working-class white people. This isn't just a black people cop problem. This is an American people cop problem. So I want to thank the people of Ferguson, thank the people of St. Louis, thank the MCs down there, and, you know, thank y'all for having me up.
Let me ask you a question, since you said your dad was a police officer. Now, you know, sometimes I get to a point where I feel like it's hard for police officers.
It is.
Because, you know, at the same time, like, we want to go home to our family. They want to go home to their family. But they don't know what a person's intentions is. Like, you know, you look at a case that happened in Jersey City where this guy ran into, I don't know if it was a CVS or Walmart. Drugstore. Beat the security guard up, took his gun, waited for the cops to come outside. When the cop came, shot the cop dead in the face, killed him. Boom.
He wanted to kill the cop.
Wanted to kill the cop. So, it gets to a point where it's a sticky situation.
Yeah.
What happened in Ferguson was totally disrespectful. You don't shoot no unarmed man 6 times. Absolutely. But, you know, in the case of, let's say, the young man in Staten Island, right? And, you know, it's hard because I don't know. I'm not a cop. Yeah, Arizona. I'm not a cop, so I don't know the holds. But I do know if I'm a police officer and I got to take you down, there's no way I can take you down without doing whatever I have to do to take you down. So it becomes a funny system because I can't take you down, Big Mike. I can't just grab you by your hand and say, get on the damn floor. I got to bite you, grab you, do whatever I got to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I sympathize with police officers. Not only was my father a police officer.
And that's just my dad was a police officer, too.
Absolutely. I'm mentored by Andrew Young, who was the mayor of Atlanta at the time where policemen still had revolvers, and they were fighting against semi-automatic weapons because they needed them. It was the middle of the crack era. A good friend of mine who's a writer, one of the most beloved R&B writers in the world, Jasper Cameron, his father was murdered. His father was a police officer that was killed. So you can imagine how this struck my household. So I understand the need for policing. I understand the need for black cops. People, oh, no, black people need to be cops. Like, I prefer to be policed by black cops. What I'm saying, though, is the same way lawyers and judges and politicians are held to a higher standard based on you taking an oath. No one came to your dad and said, I'm going to make you be a cop. No one came to my dad and said, but they had to understand when I become a cop, I have a greater social responsibility to uphold the constitutional rights of these citizens. In enforcing the law, their rights. I'm not saying 4 of those small cops could have took Eric Garner down. What I am saying is if it took 15, you deserve the call. He did not have a weapon. He was not charging you. He was actually in retreat mode. There was a wall behind him, and there was a group of people standing around him saying, no, you have the wrong guy. I watched something on YouTube that popped up of a kid who was walking by a Palestinian protest, black kid with a book bag on, right? A mall cop got it wrong, maced him instead of the person that was the aggressor. All right? It was a pro-Israel person that was the aggressor. The Palestinian people were protesting. A black kid just walking by.
Just walking through the room with his book bag on.
Black kid got maced. Black kid then resist. Held the kid's arm. The whole time the kid is just like, please get this out of my eye. Remain calm, remain professional. What was the upstanding black young man that I love to see, but it pained me because I saw him, even if it was this marginal, he was being brutalized. There were people around him that obviously weren't from his peer group, little old white lady like, no, you have the wrong person. They still, with mace, walked that child into their possibly giving him an arrest record. Now I'm just saying, if you don't have good common sense, you shouldn't be a policeman on foot patrol. If you don't have great common sense, you shouldn't be a policeman in command. So is it harder for policemen? Absolutely. Are you held at a higher standard? Absolutely. Are you the only civil servant with the power of life and death immediately in your hand? Absolutely. And that requires more responsibility.
But it gets to a point where the police officer doesn't respect the civilian, and the civilian don't respect the police officer. So it is always going to be a conflict. Same reason why when most people get pulled over, they're scared.
Yeah, no. That's not true.
Most people are.
That's not true. None of my white friends are scared when we get pulled over. I've gotten pulled over with open containers. Oh, I remember we were being driven around by, the promoters just put somebody on you. We were in D.C. Little white girls driving us around. She did 3 back-to-back U-turns. We were burning in the car. We was like, oh, my God. Like, she said, don't worry, I'm white. And I'm not making this a racial thing, but I'm just saying, no, everybody doesn't panic when police get behind them. Some people pull over and get angry and yell at the cops because they're not accustomed to that. And those people are the people who represent a social class that is known. If you kill them, and leave them laying in the middle of the street, somebody got to get some answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you talking about the driver, the white driver?
Yeah.
Okay. So you believe in white privilege?
I don't believe in white privilege. I know white privilege exists, and it's okay because I understand. I'm not saying it's okay for it to exist. I understand it exists, and I'm not mad at white people about it.
Yeah, that's my mentality.
But I would challenge more white people to listen to other white people like Tim Weiss. I would challenge more white people to accept. Like, all right, look, I accept that because I'm a big guy, when I get on the elevator, people are going to have to move.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People
nobody wants to sit by you on the plane.
Yeah, I can get a seat by myself because nobody really wants to sit by the big guy. You know what I mean? So I have certain privileges that come with being. Everything ain't bad about being a tall, fat guy. But I just want to tell white people out there, like, I don't have no issues with you, but like, be honest, and even in being honest in your convictions, advocate for the people you say you like and love. Oh, I got a black friend. Well, advocate for them.
Right.
You know, when you see something wrong, speak up about it. Because if I don't have people from the power group that are on my side, like that kid who's locked up in the mall, then I just become another statistic. And my white friends don't want me to be that, and I don't want them to walk around feeling guilty about white privilege all day.
I'm glad you said that, too, because I always tell people, don't deny white privilege, but don't deny the privileges that you have as a black person either.
I do have some privilege.
Because I feel like we have an inferiority complex when we should have a superiority complex. That's how I was brought up. I was brought up thinking you a god, you a king,
Absolutely.
You can achieve anything you put your mind to. That's how I was brought up.
Even if we aren't, I'm an American, and I'm due my constitutional rights.
Word up.
See, all the other stuff is semantics, man. How I feel about myself, I feel I'm the Asiatic God, man. I'm the ruler of the world. I feel a lot of cool things about myself. But at the end of the day, if I'm a homeless guy, schizophrenic on Skid Row, I am promised by this country and the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution inalienable rights. And all I'm saying is that's what I'm fighting for. That's what I'm advocating for. The shameful part of being an American today is not that police brutality exists. It's not that these separations between the races exist. That's not the shameful part. The shameful part is that none of us are fully living our constitutional rights because we're all protecting our little ones. Like the black people, we got to protect our right never to be in slavery. My white friends, some of them are protecting their Second Amendment rights, which more black people need to wake up to. If we don't all enjoy all our rights, then we all aren't living the full American experience. And I only say this because I travel outside these United States. Right. And if you've never traveled outside these United States, you don't know how great a country you in.
Absolutely.
Like my black friends, they be complaining stuff. I say, hey, bro, I hear you. I love you to death. But I got some homies in London, I got homies in Denmark, I got homies in Africa that would love to trade places with you. They would outwork you and you would see success in 5 to 10 years. Now, we come with some systemic stuff. We come with a bunch of trash thrown on us, a bunch of inferiority stuff thrown on us. But all I'm telling you is it doesn't matter. If you're willing to apply yourself and work hard and fight for the same things, we can start to equate this stuff. And at the end of the day, every American is due process, and you are due to have your constitutional rights honored. So stop arguing the race thing and start arguing.
Context of White Supremacy. Again, Killer Mike. Breakfast Club, that was about a week ago, last 10 days, where he gave his thoughts on what has been taking place in Ferguson, death of Michael Brown Jr. It made me, I had several thoughts. He said what he said. First and foremost, make sure we are not in the habit of criticizing and fussing at other victims of racism. If we agree with what they said or we don't agree with what they said, we really should get out of that habit. And, you know, that's something that I've advocated for a long time on the program. It just stood out to me for a variety of reasons. You all can hold me to that standard to make sure I'm not fault-finding or talking bad about Killer Mike and anything that I have to say. And he did say a lot of things that I thought were important, you know, that was good to hear, constructive things that I would agree with. I reckon I would even start with the Constitution. Mr. Fuller, I know some other non-white people who talk about the importance of constitutional rights and making an effort to use the Constitution to counter white supremacy racism. I was definitely reminded of Mr. Fuller when he was talking about the importance of recognizing, valuing constitutional rights. It reminded me when he was talking about you have a constitutional right to due process, and enforcement officials are not supposed to just be barging into your residence to search or to ask questions or whatever the case may be without a written warrant. And even he said the distinction between asking, well, is the homeowner present, as opposed to just whomever answers the door, who might not even live there, and them saying you can come in and that's good enough. Bang, we're in, we're invited, and we can do whatever we want once we're in. It reminded me of the dialogue that they've been having over the past, really since the death of Eric Garner, since he was mentioned as well, what they call the broken windows policy, and many other segments when people talk about the quote-unquote war on drugs and just the entire apparatus of how quote-unquote policing happens in this area of the world and globally. They already know this is going to be a problem for black people, quote-unquote broken windows policies. We already know this is not going to be happening in the expensive areas where you have white people, or you can even take expensive away. This is not going to be happening in areas where you have a high proportion of white residents, white homeowners. This sort of policing is not going down. Quote unquote broken windows where you're issuing citations and tickets and what have you to any random white person for the smallest thing. That's just not going to happen. They already know this is going to be something that we do in areas that have a high percentage of black residents, where it's black people who are going to be getting hemmed up with all kinds of tickets and citations and court fees and everything else for the smallest infraction, jaywalking, if you will. In my opinion, that is a race issue, a issue of white terrorism, and it's designed to be so. I also thought of the empathy gap, because I think he was talking about that as well in terms of the lack of empathy. And for me, that's where it is a quote-unquote race issue, because the report that I played last week, I think one of our listeners, misunderstanding, where she was saying that she had been thinking about that. That empathy is just not there. I talked about that with our guest, Dr. Pryor, this evening as well. That empathy is just not there. I know why the caged bird sings. The dentist says, I would rather put my hand in a dog's mouth than work on a nigger's teeth. And white people still function with that lack of value, that lack of regard for black life. Many of them, even if they are willing to roll around in the bed with a black person, that does not change their view that you are less. Your life is less than that of any white person. And that's on display on a regular basis. I thought it was an illustration of that point and also evidence of the point that I made about 2 weeks ago, where I said I have a concern with non-white people jumping to equate and sympathize with what's happening to quote-unquote Palestinians, Israel-Palestine conflict, and many of these same individuals who would jump and make a reference to what's happening there to illustrate racism, white supremacy, will not reference individuals who are classified as black in other parts of the world, the continent, Haiti, the Caribbean, Jamaica, wherever. And you heard just in that clip right there, protest. That happened here in Seattle. I didn't play the audio clip, but it got posted on my Facebook page repeatedly. I just started deleting it when it popped up again because it got posted so many times. But that happened here. And I know one of the people in that clip, the non-white female who was attempting to give the black male water, where they were out protesting Palestine. They weren't protesting to have a protest this summer in this area of the world. And it's about what's happening on the other side of the planet with all of the manifestations of white supremacy racism that are right here, that are walking distance from downtown Seattle. You got gentrification in the Central District, affectionately known as the Colored District. You could walk there from downtown Seattle where that incident happened at. No, they're protesting something on the other side of the world. Not that that is not white supremacy racism. It is. I'm just saying, if it's local, national, and global, maybe we should be directing more of our efforts to things that are within walking distance, things that you could actually do something about on a direct, tangible level. You are literally walking over black people to talk about a problem happening to non-white people on the other side of the globe who also have disregard for black people. When I saw that clip that he referenced, the thing that stood out to me immediately, because I know the person personally, the non-white female who was there trying to give water to the black male and saying that it wasn't him, that he didn't do anything. He wasn't even in their protest group. He was just a bystander, a pedestrian going wherever he was going. The thing that stood out to me immediately was that I am totally not surprised that a black person was harmed with whatever this group was doing that she was affiliated with, just because I know her personally. And I've talked about this in depth on the program before. You can go back 2010, Christine Tran, she's a non-white, black female, so-called Asian female. She was on. We talked about her involved. She too knows that female directly. You can go back and get more information, but I was not surprised at all. And it stuck out to me that they were protesting Palestine. And even some of our listeners who knew about that clip said, hey, now you got something local that you should be protesting that you're directly involved with. Why aren't they out protesting that mall to get that mall cop fired immediately and to have them revise their policy so that something like that never happens again? I'm not aware that that happened, even though that seems logical, obvious to me. Moving forward, privilege. There are many reasons when Timothy Wise is mentioned by non-white people. There are many problems that I have with Timothy Wise. He's been a guest on the program repeatedly. You can go back in the archives. If I had to pick out 3 specific things why it is a problem, I didn't hear any other authors out of all the many books, people that have written about racism, white supremacy. He did mention W.E.B. Du Bois. He did mention Marcus Garvey, but I didn't hear any other living authors, unless I missed something. I know he said he studied under the Nation of Islam, and he had discussed with other non-white people different strategies and what have you. At the end of the day, for Timothy Wise to be mentioned, Dr. Kamal Kambon, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Marimba Ani, Neely Fuller Jr., Pam with Trojan Horse Publications, all of the myriad of black people who have written about racism, we get a reference to Tim Wise. Now, granted, he did say that, white people should read what Tim Wise has to say, but even that, for me, is a part of the problem. I think, number one, I think it is massively incorrect, and not just incorrect, it is corrosive. When you get serious about racism, white supremacy, Mr. Wise is the first name that you run across. This becomes a part of your foundation for understanding what the concept of racism is beyond just a superficial level and understanding it as a system. It is hugely problematic. Number one, just because he is a white person. I wouldn't care what white person it was. That would be a major, major problem. That right there puts the belief, the idea that there are, quote unquote, good white people. There are non-racist white people, and it sets the template. If there's one, got to be more. Got to be other white people who are like him, or white people can be redeemed if they just read what he has to say. If they go to the white privilege conference, if they get some literature on this, they can be redeemed so that they will no longer be racist, which is exactly what Dr. Pryor was saying. I've concluded that that is just not so. And he is a part of all of that rhetoric and publishing books and what have you, and giving you a really good presentation, performance, really, that he is not a racist. And it has a corrosive impact on a non-white person, particularly at the early stages when they're analyzing this problem with regards to racism. Also, just the word privilege. It is astronomically incorrect. I've said before, that word should not be used. We're not talking about privilege. We're talking about power. We're talking about terrorism. We're not talking about white people just get a few extra glasses of water when they go out to eat. We're not talking about white people just get a few extra Starbucks cards where they can get a free latte every other day. That's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about we are in positions of power in every area of people activity to dominate, terrorize, and mistreat everybody that we say is not white, especially the people that we say are black. That's what this is about, not privilege. And just that alone enforcing incorrect terms, because exactly what's going to happen, it's not just going to be that white people have privilege, black people have privilege. And I've seen that just this summer. I saw an article that said it was a black female. She wrote an article, and I'm glad I don't remember her name. That way I'm not putting it out like I'm criticizing her, because she's a victim too. But she wrote an article where she was talking about, it was right after Eric Garner and Michael Brown, and she said it was something like recognizing the privilege I have as a black female. And I just said, wow, I am sure Renisha McBride and Michael Brown Jr.'s mother would love to hear about the privileges they have as black females. I'm sure they would love to hear that. And Renisha McBride's sister and Eric Garner's wife and his daughter, I'm sure they would love to hear about all the wonderful privileges they have as black females in a system of white supremacy. And I heard the exact opposite. I've heard people saying all of the privileges that black males have. I think we had a caller who chimed in with that. I'm sure Eric Garner and Michael Brown Jr. and John Crawford III, I'm sure they would love to hear about all of the privilege they have as black males. I'm sure they would love to hear that. That is total nonsense. It does not solve any problem. I've never even heard anyone address exactly what problem we're trying to solve and trying to point out, well, you have these privileges as a black female, and you have these privileges as a black male, and you have these privileges as an older black person, and you have these privileges as a younger black person. It makes no sense to me at all, and it is rooted in incorrect terms and thinking that this is white privilege. That's not what this is at all. This is about white power, white terrorism. And I'm very sure no black person, male, female, child can say, oh yeah, I have got black power under this system. We look woefully inadequate to protect ourselves, our children, our anything. I see that demonstrated every day. We wouldn't have an annual event of Black Death to celebrate every summer if that were the case. Privilege. Shouldn't be using that word if we're talking about racism, white supremacy, which is a power dynamic. Said that before. I just think it is astronomically incorrect for Timothy Wise to be the immediate reference, the go-to person if someone starts to talk seriously about racism. I said it's not just Killer Mike. David Banner did the same thing. He tweeted, this was several weeks ago, when the Ferguson thing first jumped off, that he had a tweet that sent out where he was saying that everybody, and the tweet to me suggested that it was non-white people and white people should watch Timothy Wise and get an understanding of his work. I just do not agree at all. I think he is extremely dangerous for the reasons that I have laid out, amongst many others. There are a plethora of black people, those that I mentioned, and many, many more who have outstanding works, who outline this problem, who could give details on what we need to be doing, suggestions, strategies to give you a better understanding of racism as a global concept. And things that we could be doing to solve this problem. And I just don't think that's going to come from Tim Wise, from what I have seen. Even the suggestion that white people can be reformed, I said that as well. He had talked about Second Amendment rights, which I have no problem with that at all. That was one of the suggestions for our next book, We Will Shoot Back. I definitely would encourage non-white people, black people in particular, to talk about self-defense and things that you can do to just be able to defend yourself, your family, those that you care about. I think Mr. Scotty Reed had talked about just a couple weeks back, July 4th, that some white terrorists, that they were shooting at his property. And he had his firearm at the ready to defend the homestead, himself, and his family. And that's something that we should all actively, proudly be engaged in. But just in my opinion, it is a race problem. It is racism, white supremacy, which I think even Timothy would concede, because non-white people, the rights of black people, non-white people, are just not respected. As non-white female with a white parent, Melissa Harris Perry, as she stated just a few days back, quoting the Plessy v. Ferguson decision, no rights the white man or white woman or white child is bound to respect. If all we had to do was endorse our constitutional rights, we wouldn't have all of these problems. That is simply not the case for black people. White people overstand this. Non-white people, I think we need to get a better grasp that that is the world in which we live, where your rights, your very life, is simply not respected under the system of white supremacy. That is what white people think about us. Again, that is just my view. It's not necessarily a criticism or critique. He said what he said. Those are his views. But I just find it fascinating, the times that I've heard. And even connected, I think one of our callers in St. Louis, where he said that they had invited Shelley Tuckluck or some of the Witnessing Whiteness, they had invited them to St. Louis. I just feel like these folks are very dangerous, where these become the go-to people to talk to quote, to reference, to send for. If there is an incident of racism, white supremacy, these are the folks that we should listen to. These are the folks who should guide our thinking in understanding that problem. I feel that that is woefully inadequate. That's why this problem hasn't been solved. It is a major component of that. That is a long-running theme, in my opinion, something that you can trace back for decades, really centuries, where white people do that, make sure that they have other white people that can contaminate and infect black thinking, so that we do not look to each other, ourselves, to solve our problems. It has to be some white messiah to inject themselves, that they are the ones that we're looking to, that they end up setting the parameters and borders on how we think about the problems we face as a result of racist man, racist woman, racist child. I will stop there. That is not the full conversation. It was about a half hour. It's on YouTube. If you put Killer Mike Breakfast Club, it should be the first link. If you put it in, I think he's been a guest more than once, so just make sure you get the most recent one. But like I said, it was like last week. It should say that. If you look on YouTube, if you want to see the full conversation, his full visit, to see everything that he had to say. And again, no beef, no criticism. He is a victim of racism. He said what he said. If anybody felt like I was trying to disparage or talk bad about Killer Mike, you can definitely let us know, because that was not my intent at all. It just sparked several thoughts as I was listening to what he had to share. If any of the folks that are listening in, if you all have any comments, if anything stood out, or if I'm talking crazy, if something I said didn't make sense, you can feel free to add that in as well. Any of the folks that are listening in have anything that they wanted to share? I assume folks are good. I hope I did not say anything crazy and folks let that slide. If folks do not have a comment, that is fine as well. If you all don't have anything you want to get in before we get ready to close things out.
I had something to say. I'm at work, so that's the only reason I'm silent.
Oh, right on. I guess if you need to get to a quiet spot, if you want to get your commentary in, if you want to get to a quiet spot, we can make time for you to do so. Right on, I guess, while he's waiting. If any of the other folks, if you have something you want to get in, feel free before we wrap things up. We're almost at the 3-hour mark. Again, we'll be back tomorrow for the book study session. We'll be wrapping up I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and then the compensatory call-in on Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Tune in. Looking forward to hearing from folks there. Did you a good spot calling Alabama?
I watched that same interview earlier today, and I think I will say the victim of racism, Killer Mike, he did say he was referencing that book to Caucasian people, and probably that's why he used Tim Wise. But I do agree that he is like the go-to guy for folks who, at least say they're against it. And I do think that's a big problem, though. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I totally, that is accurate. He did reference that was for white people to check out. But just as I said, even with that, I just, to me, that almost suggests that white people would alter their behavior and no longer practice racism, white supremacy once they read Tim Wise. And I haven't even seen any evidence that Tim Wise has stopped practicing racism, white supremacy, much less the people that read his book. That's the logic when I see something like that in suggesting and recommending that white people read his book, that will somehow make things better for victims of racism. I just have not seen that is true at all.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And another thing is, for real, if it's in the mainstream culture, if it's something you're going to see on any one of these nationally syndicated radio shows, I kind of give up hope. If it's a household name, it's really not going to be constructive, in my opinion.
I would agree. White people are definitely going to be cautious in guarding whom they promote and amplify with all of their newfangled technology. I would agree 1,000% on that one. Not that they, a few. I mean, I've seen Dr. Welsing on Donahue, and a few might slide by here and there, but that is generally very rare. You're not going to see Dr. Cambon or Pam, I suspect, out on some mainstream outlet where they're talking about their work, their publications, and what their views are on racism, white supremacy, or Ferguson, why these events keep happening. But
hey, when the next time you might have Pam on? When the last time you heard from Pam?
I've spoken with her privately. I meant to call her this week. There's a time difference hang up, at least on my end. When I get ready to call her, I try not to call her too late. For people that are on the East Coast or Central Time, I try not to ring them. For her, I try not to ring her after 9 o'clock because I know sometimes she has early hours. So 9 o'clock for her is 7 o'clock for me, which is still relatively early. So it ends up being a lot of times when I get ready to call her, either we'll just be getting off the program, which is normally 8 o'clock, so I'm an hour too late, and or I'll just think of it too late, and I'll have difficulties being able to call her at a time where I'm not waking her up or disturbing her. But yeah, I definitely wanted to see what her thoughts were on what had been happening this summer, and even Chicago. I mean, the area where she's at, they've every other week it seems that they're having reports on huge numbers of black people being shot from July 4th, and even over the past couple of weeks, where the same thing is happening. Just to kind of get her kind of bird's eye view on what's happening with that as well. But yeah, I'm hoping I can carve out a earlier spot in my day so I can call her and see what's up, and then maybe we can see about getting her back on the program soon.
Oh yeah, that'd be good because I know I ain't heard from her in a minute.
Yeah, lots of listeners are in the same boat, but they always appreciate hearing her views and her just being honest about the problems we face and suggestions, things that we can do to try to solve this problem. The website, again, racismws.com. You can go and check out any of the books. Black Love is a Revolutionary Act, The Interracial Con Game, The Beauty Con Game, and Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation. She's also been updating her blog as well. But yeah, I will definitely get on my grind. It will not be today, obviously, but hopefully I can nab her within the next 48 hours or so, kind of see what she's been up to, and we can get a date nailed down for September, hopefully. But unless folks had anything else they wanted to make sure we got in before we wrapped up. We did our 3 hours. Anybody have anything else they needed to get in before we conclude? Right on. Hope folks are remaining constructive. That cannabis thing stood out to me in the clip as well. The people, I know we've talked about this many times before, I would not recommend burning in the vehicle. That is one of the worst things that you can do as a black person under the system of racism, white supremacy. I say that almost always as a PSA. If you got to consume some alcohol or cannabis or whatever the case may be, I would encourage being behind closed doors and stay there. Do whatever you're going to do. Stay there overnight. That way you can be sober and leave the next day. Many of the non-white people, black people that I know of who have had problems with cannabis and even alcohol, it's been when they are behind the driver's seat. That is not a time you want to be consuming, even if you're a passenger in the vehicle. That is just not recommended behavior, in my opinion. Even here in Washington State, that is not legal. Even with all of the legalization that they did with cannabis, that is still illegal, and they made those penalties even harsher when they legalized in terms of being able to take it treated just like they would a DUI in terms of suspending your driver's license. And I mean, it can get nasty and expensive if they pull you over and decide, oh, you got a little bit too much in your system, or you're consuming while the vehicle is in motion. That is just not something I would co-sign on. I think he said he was in D.C. when that happened, and they voted earlier this year to decriminalize in D.C., and they might even be voting in a few weeks to totally legalize in Washington, D.C. That could be happening. That was something that they were talking about, and they were saying it looks like they would have enough votes that it would pass for the nation's capital. Even then, I would say that is a dangerous move to make. If you are a black person, if you constantly hear people talking about, quote-unquote, driving while black, you don't want to add anything else to that equation that could potentially make you a target for a racist white male, white female with a badge and a gun. That's just my logic, my thinking about it. I know folks have their own opinion, but woo, you are asking for big-time troubles and lots of expenses as well. Again, we'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, finishing up I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, the book study club. We are voting the new book that we're starting next Friday. Right now, the leading vote getter is Richard Williams, Black and White, The Way I See It, Venus and Serena's father, his book that just came out a few months ago this year. That is the leading vote getter right now. There are other books that have been suggested as well. We Will Shoot Back, which is about black self-defense, black counterviolence in Mississippi, where black people had their guns and were ready to roll, and dealing with racist white people, which I highly commend. But that is another one that has gotten votes. But Richard Williams, Black and White, that is the leading vote getter right now. You certainly still have time to vote. I think we'll probably go till next Wednesday. So if you want to vote, you can email in or Facebook if you have suggestions for books for the book study club. The new book would be starting next Friday. With that, unless folks, if you have questions, confusion, feel free to drop an email. If you have something you need to get clarified, invest. If you think the program is constructive, racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported, counter-racist radio. PayPal is in the top right corner. If you are not feeling PayPal, you can drop me an email and get a mailing address. We can hook you up if you would like to support the broadcast. Thanks to everyone who has helped us remain on the air for closing in on 6 years. I hope it has been a constructive investment of your time and energy. With that, thanks everyone for tuning in. Remain safe for your Thursday evening. Safe, constructive, and if you got to be acting a fool, even then you should still be codified. Creator, we ask that you help us be honest about our enemies, eternal enemies. White folks, racist woman, racist child, racist man. Help us be patient with other black people, victims of racism. Help us be patient with ourselves. Remind us to call on our ancestors to help us remain courageous, strong, steadfast in our commitment to replacing white supremacy with justice immediately. Context of White Supremacy signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.